welcome back.
Fuck, it is good to see you again, man.
Very, very good. Long time no see.
We need to make sure that we don't do these so infrequently because there's a whole heap of shit's happened in both our lives between we last sat down and actually talked, just in general.
Yeah.
Like we had an hour at lunch and we could have taken another 2 or 3 easy, I think.
Absolutely. And I think our other issue was that we recorded a podcast like a year ago and then that got lost to like memory cards and stuff. So there's like a 2.5 year gap.
Oh, there is too. Yeah. Because that was a podcast we just did in that motel room.
Yeah.
We caught up.
In Darwin. You were doing work or something and I was going to Montana.
That's right.
For that elk trip.
That's exactly what it was. And we just caught up briefly and did a podcast, and then I lost the audio.
Something happened, I remember, and
I lost one channel of audio or something.
Yeah.
I remember that. I literally forgot about that till just now.
The only reason I remember that is because I was running on like just working flat out before that, and then pulled over on the side of the road to video that buffalo and called it in, and it like charged me. And then talking to you about it and being like, I want to hear that story back, and then have never been able to hear it back. And I've, to be honest, kind of forgot what happened, but yeah.
Fuck, we've got a lot to discuss then.
That was in 2023, September 23.
Holy. That actually, the last 2 years have gone super quick for me. It's weird, but I also feel like I haven't seen you in 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's just that head down, arse up sort of nature of, and doing job to job or week to week. We've both sort of been in the same boat there with work. Then you sort of have a second to breathe and you go, shit, I haven't seen that person for 6 months.
And I think because we did so much together when we did live in the same place, that it's like we saw each other so frequently that when we didn't see each other, it felt like a longer period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But you spent the last, 12 or so months, 18 months in Katherine?
Yeah, it's probably been 2 years now. I did a 2-year stint there. So graduated uni in 2022. Which is when I was living in Townsville and seeing you like every weekend, going diving a lot, doing a little bit of hunting trips and stuff, just catching up for dinners and podcasts and whatnot. And then in 23 started up in Katherine, at Katherine Vet Care as a full-time veterinarian doing mixed practice work, and have seen that through until now, being 2025. And just had a slight change of scenery now. Things are sort of up in the air, but yeah, plenty to look forward to, which is good. Going to sort of transition from working for other people to working more for myself and take that leap of faith and try and just do more with the twin elements and the hunting sort of side of things.
So was the time in Katherine used as leverage, like to build a nest egg and fund, like set yourself up for the future? And then why did you decide that was the time to then take twin elements to the next level? Yeah,
so definitely going into it, it was a place that I'd done like 12 weeks of placement as a vet student and loved it, loved the atmosphere, the people, the work, the actual like animal side of things was really interesting to me. It also had massive pluses in terms of like my hobbies and passions with the hunting up there being insane and just remote parcels of land that you can go and like hunt and fish on and see cool things every day and the adventure side of it. But for me, I'd always said like, I want to go there for 2 years and sort of reevaluate. But I was pretty committed to seeing that through, I guess, and doing the work for 2 years and just like, because I feel like you've got to sort of commit to things to actually like be able to get a true sense of what it is. Very quickly, I realised that like it was a place that if I was in Katherine working, I was working. Like there was very little leisure unless I booked it out way in advance. So the first year that I did there in 2023, which is sort of towards the end of when I saw you for that podcast that didn't quite get recorded or whatever, that was a very big learning curve. Like there were times there, I think I was coming on the back of like 45 days, effectively working from my car out on cattle stations, working every single day from like 5 a.m, preg testing cattle till dark, and then would drive like a couple 100 kilometers to the next cattle station and do that again. So like, it's hard because I look back now and like whilst I was learning so much and upskilling as a veterinarian and working really hard, because I was only 1 year out of uni, I wasn't necessarily making the monetary gains that I should have been for how much work I was doing. So then learning from that, I sort of went into 2024 and said, okay, I'm happy to do that work and work really hard, but I'm going to do it on a 3-on, 1-off sort of system, just so I can do more hunting. Because I quickly, as I said, learned that if I wasn't the one controlling, like I'm having a week off here, I'm having a week off there, like there was no such structure as like a 9 to 5, 10-day fortnight for me. It was like if you're fit, healthy in Katherine, you're working. Like that was just the reality of it. So yeah, fast forward to 24, started to get paid a little bit more, which was like a lot better for doing virtually the same work. It's just that I was able to like get paid per head of preg testing. So that was an incentive for me, as like, you know, the more you do, the more you push it, get to the next job, do that, like you're going to get more money. So I essentially just saw it as, yeah, for the next year that I'm here, really set up that nest egg and just save. For me, luckily, there was like accommodation in the package. I was often living out of my car, staying on cattle stations and getting fed and accommodation there when I was working there, or living out of like a swag and things. So it wasn't like I was spending money on alcohol. I don't smoke, I don't gamble or anything like that. So essentially was able to save like, yeah, quite a lot of money, which has set me up now to be in a like good position for the next step of my sort of future, which is exciting.
And what's Twin Elements looking like in the future? Like what direction do you want to take it?
Yeah, so that's a big thing, that on top of like that full-time veterinary work, in the background every morning I'd wake up and do Twin Elements emails, post reels, do scheduling, all these sorts of things, and was just ticking along with the bare minimum as such with Twin Elements. And then 2024 was a massive year with us because we started getting paid for like our ambassadorships. It was like a year where a lot of the sponsors and brands that we'd worked with previously had come to the party and like were valuing us in the form of monetization. So we're getting paid to do certain things, which for us was massive, just because it kind of gave us a bit of confirmation, like you're heading in the right track. Eventually you want to do this more and more full time, but when you've got like a successful occupation such as veterinary science that you spent 5 years at uni doing, it's hard to sort of just like throw that away essentially and go full blown into something that's not really earning any money. So the fact that it started ticking over a little bit was very exciting. And then using that momentum from 2024 this year with Twin Elements, James and I are launching a podcast, which is going to drop on the 13th of January. Like it'll be our first episode. So we're extremely like excited for that. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. Just as well, like the films that we're doing are getting better and better with like newer content, better camera gear and stuff like that. And we're getting better and faster and more efficient at editing. But also like a big thing for me was the last 2 years, in all honesty, have been pretty tough in the sense of I really did just put work and money first, sort of probably neglected relationships, friendships, hunting even. Like I was there living in the Northern Territory and I only got out to go out for a handful of hunts. So for me, in reflection, like I sort of set back and said, I just want to 2025, like set back a lot. And instead of always feeling like I've got to do a job and within that job preg test 1,000 animals and then drive X amount of kilometers and then do that for the next day, and like everything was very like regimented down to the number, the hour, the minute, like time scaled. Everything was very like precious situation. Now I'm just like, no, I want to do enough work to be comfortable and then just like relax. And if I feel like waking up and having a coffee with a mate, I'm going to do that. If I feel like waking up, going spearfishing, the weather's good, I'm going to do that. Yeah, for me, that shift in mentality, I just want to be like a lot more present in 2025. And part of that is also just doing more of the Twin Elements stuff, which is like my true passion and hobby, I guess. So,
do you think trying to find that balance is detrimental to both sides of the fence? Like you're not, I wouldn't say not 100% committed, but like your commitment has lowered on each side. Do you know what I mean? Like, is that detrimental to...
Yeah,
or you think it possibly you having a better mindset, so you having, say, time off to live life, do you think that positively puts you in a positive mindset to then chase business?
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure. And I guess part of like what I haven't mentioned is like towards the end of 2024, I went through a really rough patch personally, where I went through like a breakup with someone that like I'd been with for quite a long time and had plans for the future, and obviously thought they were going to be in my life for a long time. And to be honest, that was probably like one of the toughest parts of my life that I've ever gone through. And part of like why I was working so hard was to set myself up to be with that person and do like all these things forever. And I think without having that like disappear and not be relevant in my future anymore, it really sort of made me think like, what's the point a little bit? So I'm a very driven, like motivated person, very disciplined, like trying to always like level up to a sense. But I also, having experienced that, have had this weird moment in my life now where I'm like leveling up for what, or for who, or for like to what point, to a little bit, to a degree, because there's always more work, there's always more money to earn, there's always more things that you can do. And I kind of like look back, and it sounds like a bit novel because I've just earned like quite good money over the last 2 years, and like in a really good position now with money to make decisions on my future, whether that's like invest in a house or do whatever. But I kind of look back, and I think I was talking to you at lunch earlier, like it's like I would do anything to go back to that last year of uni where I was living on $600 a fortnight and, you know, living with my partner, and we were diving regularly, we were having dinners regularly, like I was training with like friends and her, I was going for walks with our dogs, having coffees in the morning and just chilling out. Whereas the more you sort of want to bite off from that apple, the more you're sort of like, you know, chasing things and running around, and there's like less time to sort of probably relax and just, again, like that word I want to use is be present. Like I just want to sit down and relax a little bit this year. So as a business sense, I think like if you're good at something, there will always be opportunities. And that's one thing, like I'm fortunately, and this is probably blowing hot air up at my ass, but like I've been talented enough to do whatever I like enjoy, I seem to be good at. And whether that's like vet or hunting or diving or photography or whatever, it's like once I start actually going, oh, I'm good at this, I'm enjoying this, and put effort into it, I seem to like just build on that naturally. And a part of that is obviously because I am disciplined and have hard work ethic and things like this. So yeah, I don't know if that like answers your question, but like in terms of going a bit half in terms of like, do I go full blown towards making money or full blown towards relaxing and all these types of things? It's like, hopefully I can just like earn enough money to make every day like better as such, and enjoy every day. Cause like I look back over the last 2 years in particular with work and stuff like that, and I can honestly count on one hand how many times I was like genuinely really happy doing something, and it was every time I caught up with my brother for a hunting trip, or caught up with my ex-girlfriend for like a weekend away, or caught up with like mates and stuff like that for a diving trip. So all those things, if I can enhance those and do them as part of my life more often, I think it's just going to be more rewarding.
I think that makes sense, and I agree, because like I tried to build my business around the stuff that I loved, which is exactly what you're trying to do as well. And I still am trying to find the line between like I'm in too deep to take my foot off the gas. Like I'm at a pivotal point in the business where if I go harder or hard as now, I have the ability to make it to sort of skyrocket and scale at a rapid rate. Yeah. And that's just from a larger amount of clients, better networking, smarter at running businesses, don't make as many mistakes and hemorrhage money where I don't need to. I've got a lot of support now, like guys work with me and for me and stuff. So I'm at a really pivotal point now where I can't sort of stop. Like I want to be able to go, oh, I'd love a week off and go and do something fun. But the other side of me goes, yeah, but if you do that, you're a week behind. And then that's a week longer you're going to have to grind later to scale. Yeah. It's like, it's sort of like a double-edged sword.
It's this niggly little like voice in the back of your head that says like, you're not doing enough all the time. And I feel that, like, I remember like working a lot, like probably don't do it justice even now talking about it, but like doing 45 days in a row of preg testing, like, 700-800 head a day on average, and then driving 300 Ks at night to get to the next station, living out the back of your car, sleeping in a swag, doing that for 45 days is like very, very strenuous on like not even like physically, but mentally, emotionally. You're not talking to that many people. You got to turn up every morning, do it all through the daylight hours until dusk, and then drive again. So it even gets to the point where it's like mentally fatiguing as well. And for me, like I'd have a week off at the end of that 45 days, or I'd go to America for that hunting trip, and that was like enough of an incentive to keep doing it. So I think it's just working out like what your incentive is, what you're doing like this work right now for. And what I would sort of urge people is like there's all these things you can do in life, and there's, to be honest, you can always sort of, there's a lot of things that like there's an opportunity cost. So like for me now, it's like I do want to kind of go to America and do some of these cool hunts now, because in 30 years time when my body's not as able to, I might not be able to do that hunt, for example, like New Zealand or America. But there's also like a big part of like who you're doing it for as such too. So like if you've got a partner or mates and things like that you like, and potentially like, you know, spending time away from or working really hard, and you find that's putting like a separation in your relationship. I don't know. It's one of those things that now it's like I probably took it for granted a little bit over the last like year or two, because in my head with work, I was like, no, I am doing this for me and that person. It will pay off. But unless you sort of communicate that to them, there's a danger or a threat that they could just go, he puts work before me, or X, Y, Z, you know. So unless you're communicating that, you know, why you're doing it with that person, and you can go, okay, yeah, for that initial sacrifice of 2 years, 5 years, like with work, that makes sense. And that comes back to like, even with your work and working with some of the people you work, like, hey, I'm employing you. This is my vision of what, if you put in all this work, and like you may be able to step up and, you know, buy into the business when we're at this point, but until we're at that point, we can't do that, or X, Y. Like there's so many things. And I think communication is just like a massive thing with all of those avenues. And like, I don't know, talking to people about it, because it's good, like, especially if you're like a little bit fatigued and at times going like, I've got all this work to do, feeling overwhelmed by it potentially, or excited by it too, but then going, oh, I wonder what effect that's going to have on my relationship with my partner or my work employees or whatever. Like, I think it's just important to like, one, hear it in your own like thoughts, and then talk to people about it, and talk to those people and let them inform you as, oh, I don't want to wait 5 years. I'm going to leave before then. Or yeah, I'm happy to like chip in for 5 years and then we can continue to enjoy it. But as long as we do this after that point, like there's just, you can't undervalue like communication, I think.
Do you struggle to convey that mindset to most people? That's where like for me, hardship, like I don't think many things in life are like truly difficult or hard. Like it's like a pain, if you think of it as a pain tolerance, and me working for that 45 days straight, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a 5 out of 10. What I find truly hard is like losing a spouse or you know, my parents being sick or my grandparents dying or something like that is like a 10. Like that's really hard. Whereas me rocking up to work that I've chosen to do, I'm getting paid for it, and putting my best foot forward is not that difficult for me in my head. And again, if I am finding it really difficult, then I just talk to my employer and say, hey, I didn't sign up for 45 days straight in the bush doing this work. I want a clinic day, or I want a weekend off, or I want this. Like you know, there's flexibility with everything. There's always, so as long as you identify what the problem is, there's no point like getting bitter on it and sitting there going like, oh, I'm working really hard and no one appreciates me. Like if you've been mature enough to analyze that and think that, in my opinion, you've got to be able to then verbalize that, because you can't hold people accountable and be like, oh, my boss is an asshole for making me work 45 days straight. He might be if you've voiced that to him and said, hey, I don't want to do this. But if you haven't, like, and that's the thing, I had no reason to not do that, because I knew that at the end of that 45 days, I was going to America. So I was fine with it. My situation was fine. For me, like in hindsight, a lot of like my sort of regret, or what I feel guilty for, is that the relationship fell apart with my partner. And that, again, it's one of those things that like, yeah, whilst I say I regret it, it's just with hindsight. But at the time, like my communication with her as like two individuals that were doing that together, we had like an end date that I was leaving the Northern Territory, which is why I'm here now out of the Northern Territory. I've finished up that work. Like I was going to do that regardless of if we were together or not. Where we fell apart is that she didn't communicate to me that she had needs and wanted me there sooner. Like she had been struggling a lot more that she hadn't like articulated to me. So again, the fact that I was operating that everything was fine, and then undermining all that was the fact that she wasn't, sort of changes everything. So in hindsight, it's like, would you change things? Like, yeah, I would have left earlier and had a hard conversation with my boss and said, hey, I have to go, just because of where my priorities were. But because I was never aware of them, I didn't have that opportunity. So yeah, it's like a trickier sort of situation. I think every time that's hard to navigate. And I think because what you're doing and what I'm doing, you're a bit of an outlier with how you think about things and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people don't hold themselves accountable, or allow themselves to provide themselves perspective. And I think that's where the downfall is. Tell me about America, because I spoke to you pre-America, and then obviously I've caught up with you about it afterwards and seen the content and all that sort of stuff. But that was a big trip for you guys to go and do it, and well planned, and very, like, a lot of really good luck in getting the tags that you drew and all that sort of stuff. So tell me about your plan there.
Yeah, so the backstory behind that is, like, my twin brother James, who is like my business partner with Twin Elements, he had been applying in the US. So to go over there and hunt, you have to have, you can either buy private land tags, which are extremely expensive, or the benefit of hunting in America is that they've got, like, the big game management system, which is all done on, a lot of it is done on public land, which just gives people and affords people the opportunity to go and hunt on, like, public land for animals that are declared as, like, the state's or the people's animals, essentially. And he'd been applying for, like, 2 years, I think, and was going through this hunting full consultancy, which essentially they were like, this is what you should do to build your points, and it's expensive. Like, he was spending thousands of dollars each year to essentially just build up a point so that in 5 years' time he could hopefully go and cash in 5 years worth of points and do, like, a moderate level hunt. But in the background, he was also, like, trying to get into these, like, limited entry, like, putting his chips in just, like, random little lottery sort of, you know, bids, I guess, almost essentially like a raffle. And he was applying in Montana for this one particular unit, and very fortunately for him, he drew what was called a limited entry elk hunt, which means that instead of, like, 18,000 people potentially getting a tag to go and hunt elk in, you know, Victoria, for example, in Australia, or a unit over there, like Unit 1, he got to hunt in Unit, say, 50, and there was only 100 other people who were given tags in that unit, and the unit could be hundreds of kilometres in area. So he basically called me in, like, March 2023 and was like, cancel everything. We are going to Montana in the USA in September. No ifs or buts. This is going to be, like, the hunt of a lifetime. And I was kind of like, fuck, like, I've literally just signed, you know, I've only been working here for, like, a month or two. And I, again, through communication, through talking to my boss, said, I'm happy to do whatever it takes work-wise, as long as I can have a month off in September. And he said, okay, that essentially means you're going to be working all of June, July, August, cattle preg testing on properties. I was like, yep, cool. And then, as we were alluding to in the earlier conversations, I did that 45 days straight of just, like, really intense work. Finished preg testing, drove home, grabbed all my gear, drove straight up to the airport, saw you for that night just before I flew out of Darwin. And then that started, like, 5 or 6 flights until James and I landed in
so shit flying
Montana.
over there, man. Fuck.
Yeah, it was like 2 days worth of travel, and nearly missed the first Sydney flight because my flight from Darwin got delayed, and then it just would have been chaotic trying to, like, catch up and calibrate with James's flights and stuff. But touch wood, it all worked really, really well. And again, as I was sort of alluding to, because James had drawn the tag, he was only legally allowed to hunt. So I didn't have my bow at all. It was me purely there as, like, a filming cameraman, which, like, was awesome for me. But people are always like, oh, why don't you shoot anything? I'm like, I legally, even if I wanted to, I physically could not shoot anything. So, like, on that trip, James had a bow. He had the objective of hunting and shooting a mature bull elk. I had the objective of being there with him every second to give him, like, mental counselling, physically motivate him, and basically be there to capture that moment on film if it occurred. And, like, to be honest, James had done an elk hunt the year before and was successful in a general entry elk unit, which, again, like, speaks to, like, the hunter that he is and being able to, you know, translate skills and things that he's learnt here in Australia, go over to America for the first time and in a public land setting on lands he's never stepped foot on, animal he's never hunted, shoot, like, a nice bull elk, which there are many people in, like, America, for example, that hunt every year for 30 years and never shoot an elk. Like, there's a saying, I think, with elk hunting that 10% of hunters shoot 90% of the elk or something like that. And it's, once you, like, think about it, it's so true. Like, once you've shot an elk and know where they are and know how to shoot them, you're going to be successful most years. It's like Cam Haines shoots a bull on the first day of the season every year, for example, because he just knows what it takes to shoot a bull elk. Like it's one of those things, once you've done the reps, it sort of becomes like familiar and easier. And until you do that, it's like this thing that I experienced it a lot on this trip, because we had the weird mentality of there's going to be bulls everywhere. It's going to be easy. We've just got to pick like the bull and then stalk it and shoot it. Like, because you hear limited entry, only 100 people are ever going to hunt this unit this year. It's highly coveted and stuff like that. And it's like, we got there and like, it was just like not what we expected at all. The weather was hotter than we thought it would be. Like the bugling activity and stuff was really, really quiet for the first like 15 days. We were seeing bulls that were like, oh, like, is it a good bull? Is it not? You don't really have anything to scale it for. It's like, if someone goes to you like, oh, you want to target like a 100-point buffalo or something, like that's a mature bull, that's cool. But until you've actually put your hands on a 100-point buffalo and like seen it on the ground and like measured it, you're like, oh, that's a 100-point buffalo. It's hard to actually work out what a scale is. Whereas we were looking at these elk and like, we were just like, that's a giant, that's a giant, that's a giant, every single one. And then you'd get this weird, like you'd look at it and see an elk through the binoculars and be like, it's huge. Then you'd like look at it for 30 seconds and that adrenaline would worn off and you're like, is it? And then 30 seconds later, you're like, nah, it must be. It must, like, no reference or like, background of knowledge on these animals. So it was just super hard to actually judge. But in saying that, the emotional roller coaster of just like, we got there, got all our gear over there, luckily, bought food and stuff, set up our camp. We were able to like camp where the car was essentially and then hunt from there. And we did have like backpack tents that we could set up as well and hunt out from there if we weren't finding elk and stuff like that. But it was just like insane. So to like cut the story a little bit shorter, we ended up doing like a 20-something day hunt with like a few days before season opener where we tried to scout some elk. Didn't have really any luck. And then sort of set up our camp and we're hunting from there, seeing groups of cows, but no bulls in the first early days. And it was just, every day it's sort of like you're going through this process of going, okay, that's one day out. We've only got X amount of days left. But then you'd have one good day where you'd have a stalk in the morning and then see another elk that afternoon, or you'd see elk at lunchtime or something like that. And like that day just felt action packed, like anything could happen. And you're like, yep, the rut's coming. Like we heard a bull bugle, the rut's coming, it's getting colder, like this and this. And then the next day just be completely like a hit and a miss. And that mental battle of like riding the highs and then riding the lows was really, really interesting. And it was really good to have each other to bounce off, because there'd be times where James would be unmotivated to get to that next ridge because he was like, bugger it, it's too hot, there's nothing going to be bugling. And I was like, yeah, but what if? And then same thing for me, like I've been tired because we were carrying obviously camera gear and all our gear and stuff like that. And just having someone to like check you and go, what was our goal before this trip? You're going to shoot a bull elk, I'm going to get it on video, and have someone keep you accountable is like next level. And then no bullshit, not like, oh yeah, I understand you're not feeling that good, like you're jet lagged or something like that. Like, yeah, we'll go back and have an easy one. But having the high standards and being like, nah, bullshit, like this is a once in a lifetime tag, we're going to push it as hard as we can. And also having that person be like your best mate and your brother was pretty exciting and pretty memorable. But yeah, there's just so much to unpack from that trip. Like it was insane. It was just, yeah. And I look back on the conversations that we had while glassing elk and like the things that we said and those highs and lows and committing to each other, like getting back at camp at like 11 o'clock at night, pissing, like it's been pissing down with rain, you're drenched to the core. Fortunately, we had really good gear, so you're not like super cold or hypothermic or anything like that. But then you say to your brother like, nah, tomorrow's the day, like let's set the alarms for 3 and we're going to hike to that ridge 2 hours before like daylight and we'll be there and we're going to shoot a bull first thing. And we did that for like 20 days until it finally happened. But like, it was just, yeah, doing it with my brother was like one of the best parts of it by far. Like him shooting the elk was cool in the end. And like everyone can go and like watch that. We filmed it, as I said, like again, like filming something like that, let alone doing the hunt, was hard, and then filming it and trying to cover it and do justice to like what's going on was so tough with like limited battery, because you're filming for 20 days. You can't back up cards enough. You're trying to be selective with what you shoot, what you don't shoot, to give like testament as to how physically challenging the hunt was. We were like obviously at a caloric deficit every day just because we couldn't physically carry enough food in to where we were hunting. And then because we were trying to cover as much ground and be busy and not waste any time or days or anything like this, we were like probably not eating as much as we should have. So like in 20 odd days, I lost 6 kilos, and I'm not like quite a lean person. Like there's not that much of me to lose. So like the fact that I lost 6 kilos just lugging around camera gear was up and down the mountains was like, you know, tells you how hard we were sort of doing it. But it's just, yeah, one of those things, like I look back on it and it's like, I'll remember that forever. It was insane.
Do you have any memorable encounters, elk or otherwise?
Yeah, it's funny, like a few of them are not even elk related. Like I remember there was one day, one of like the sub stories in this whole saga was like every time we drove our car, which was like a rental car, every single time we drove it, we'd get a flat tire, like every single time. And there was this one afternoon or night, we'd driven back from like a spot that we had to drive to like hike in and access. So it was like late at night, and we finally got back to camp. And then the next morning we realized that we'd got a flat somehow on this drive back to camp, and we were going to try and get back there because we'd seen a good bull, and we didn't have the camping gear to like set up there. So long story short, we go to jump in the car to like early start, 3 a.m. drive to get there and then hike in, and there's a flat, and we're like, oh fuck, like this is not the right timing. Like we're trying to hunt this bull. So we fix that flat, go like 500 meters, get another flat. And we didn't, that's our like spares and everything done. And I can't remember how we even navigated through it, but we like limped down and got like a property owner like to help us like on a property, and borrowed like a buggy to get a compressor up to the thing, limp that down to their house. And then I think we even borrowed like someone's spare like Chevy or something like that to drive into town and get new tires. Like it was a bit of a saga. But on that journey, driving to town, which was 2.5, 3 hours away, so we essentially kissed that day goodbye, like, or that morning goodbye. Driving to the town where it was closest, we see this rattlesnake on the side of the road, and I remember just thinking that is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like it didn't, and like it's so like you're having the shittest day, like this bull that you're trying to shoot is out there probably bugling its head off in a really shootable position, and you're driving to town to fix tires on a car that, you know, is just a pain. But there's actually a scene in the film where James is like, we went into town and we hadn't had any sweets or good food. Like we'd had just been, you know, living off bars and dehydrated foods and things like this. So we went and got like a chocolate thick shake from Macca's, just as like an energy pick me up on the way out. And James has this funny line. I can't remember what he says exactly, but the guy's like, what can I get you today? And he's like, do you have something that cures depression? And the guy's like, sorry, what's that? And Jay's like, oh, no, never mind. Can I just get 2 like chocolate thick shakes? And it was just, that was like off the cuff. Like I just hit record because I thought it'd be like funny to show the thick shakes. But like I got that audio and it just like, it captured that day perfectly of like the lows being so low. Like you're about to go in your mind, you put this bull to bed the night before, and then you get a flat tire that night. You can't get back to the hunting spot. Your spare's got a flat, like you're literally riding on rim. Do all this saga to get out, but in that you see this animal that you'll probably never see again or haven't seen, like this rattlesnake, which was so cool. And I just remember like the motion that it moved in was like mesmerizing because it was so thick and like round. It didn't slither like a normal, like, you know, eastern brown snake that we're used to. It just like slugged along. Like it was just would like flip and like propel itself, and it kind of made it erratic and a bit scary. Yeah, right. So like you didn't want to get near it, like obviously, but it was just like cool to see. So that was definitely like one wildlife encounter that I was like, we wouldn't have seen that if we were hunting. Like where we had to drive through to get to town was a bit more arid, and that's why it was there, but it was just like a chance encounter. Another one would have been, it might have even been on the way back to camp from that, but like I spotted this skylined mule deer buck up on a ridge, and James had a tag, but where we were driving through was private property where they had asked us like, you can shoot an elk if you see one on here, but you're not allowed to hunt mule deer. And just because they'd had like low recruitment numbers over the last few years, they'd had a few tough winters, which meant there weren't many fawns on foot. And then they also had quite a lot of coyotes and things preying on the young fawns. So they were just, as like a private property initiative and agreement, a lot of those properties have said, we're not going to shoot mule deer for a few years. We're going to let them breed back up. And we saw this buck, and I remember just saying to James, like, I'd love to get a cool photo of that. So I like raced up this hill, like did this big stalk and got into like 30 meters of this awesome mule deer buck, took a few photos and sort of was like, shit, I wish I had my bow because this is like perfect. Like it just always happens like that. But I look back on those photos and just, again, like think it was so cool to be able to capture that moment on an animal that I'd otherwise never really like spent time like with in its vicinity. And just like, I remember like, yeah, just taking the photos and the sound of like the shutter and me like just breathing heavily, it just knew something was there and like flicked its head up and sort of was like cottoned on to me so quickly. And yeah, that was a very cool encounter. But as far as like the actual elk hunting goes, we had so many. The film that we have produced thus far almost acts as a bit of like a highlights reel sort of thing. Like it's less of an actual cinematic film it's a cinematic film in the sense of the footage is really cool, but like it doesn't go into the emotional depth that like I wanted or had thought of based on like what I know we've filmed and actually captured. Just those, as I said, there's like so many integral parts of each day where we have like a chat about, you know, how it's not going to happen that day, and then 20 minutes later a bull bugles and that attitude flips completely to like, we're going to kill this bull. Like, and I really want to like do a saga and do something with that sort of, just to show you like that, yeah, the mental side of bow hunting is so important. And even like there's also like for a lot of it, I could tell that James felt very like pressured to shoot a bull elk because like he's drawn this tag that's a once in a lifetime, you want to make the most of it. But then the beauty of it, a lot of it was you would see a bull that he would happily shoot any other time and just like spend time watching it was really, really cool. And then walk away from that as like purely just with admiration for the animal and what we've just seen. And it kind of like, we're sort of, the longer the hunt went on, the more our cup was filled with just cool encounters and cool like moments that it sort of was getting it was weird because we were getting closer to killing something every day, I felt, but we were also getting closer to this realization that like if we don't kill something, it doesn't matter. Like if that makes sense, like it was weird. Like every day that we were there, we were figuring things out. And like one of our biggest benefits was that we were very much like, let's just observe and not be too aggressive. Like it would have been easy for us to just go and rip bugles and call and go to every single bull and like put pressure on every animal. Whereas we kind of went, oh, okay, there's these mob of cows, which are female elk, in front of us here. We've found where they're living. We'll just get to this high ridge every morning and basically watch them, because every day, like as it got cooler from like September 15th, we were there at the end of August, and then from like September 15th to 21st or 2nd or whatever, whenever James shot his bull, that like you could feel it like just building and climaxing almost. Like the weather was getting better, there were more density of cows in this area, the rutting activity was increasing. So it was just like every night you'd go to bed and sleep for 3 or 4 hours and then be back up again and exhausted. But you just knew that like you were so close to it happening, because everything you were doing was leading up to the right moment. It was just, eventually it was going to happen. Like it felt like that. So that was just, yeah, an amazing hunt to be part of.
Do you think you'll go back there with your own hunting goals in mind?
Yeah, so this year so last year, 2024, I couldn't get there. I just, with work and a few other things, I couldn't get there. Was meant to be moving from Catherine and doing a few other things. So I bought a preference point, which means that I sort of didn't actually apply to hunt, but I bought a point, cashed in a point. So this year in 2025, I'm essentially buying another point and will apply with 2 points. And in Montana, and specifically, that means you've got like a roughly 80% chance of drawing in a general unit. So my hope is that, yeah, I'll be able to hunt in a general unit this year for elk and mule deer. Like there's a 20% chance that I don't draw, unfortunately. But the benefit is that James is also applying on 50% because he's got like his points reset. So he'll be going in with 1 point. Just because he did apply last year and didn't get like an allocation. But yeah, I've actually started like my applications process a lot over since that hunt. And again, through like Hunting Fool, they make it so easy in the sense of like they've got people saying like, all right, Wade, what are your expectations? Like as an Australian resident, do you want to come over here every year and hunt? Do you want to hunt the best tag every year? Because that we would say like buy landowner tags, or do you want to do a point accumulation process in the states that you can and do a good to moderate hunt and back your fitness and back your like hunting expertise and knowledge and stuff, and do that every 5 years or 10 years or whatever, depending on the state, depending on the species, depending on the unit. And we sort of, as individuals, James and I went, if we can do a good elk hunt in a different state every 5 years, that's perfect for us. So we're essentially playing like the Russian roulette of like, in the background, we're applying in all these states like Arizona, New Mexico, where it's essentially you could have X amount of points, 20 points for the year, and you don't really have that much better odds as Wade or Ayden Doumtsis who are applying with 1 point. Like it's not that, it's like a lottery. Whereas like states like Wyoming and Montana and Colorado and a few of these other places, yeah, you apply for 5 years, and on that 5th or 6th year, you've got a really good chance of doing like a great mule deer hunt or a great Wyoming hunt. And if you have 5 or 6 places, in theory, you can do a good hunt every year, just in a different spot. So that's sort of how we're going to play the game a little bit. And it's just one of those things. It's like, it's a bit like gambling, really. But for us, it's something that like, yeah, doesn't feel like we're throwing our money away for us as a sense on the pokies or something, or a greyhound or whatever. It's like to go and do an adventure down the line. So
people say that those trips are expensive, but yeah, they kind of are. But also like the amount of life value that has, like the living side of it. And I don't really think you can put a price tag on that. Like I know, and I was just saying this to you at lunchtime, like I'm going to film a stone sheep hunt in BC, and it's like a 3-person plane to get there. It's like 3 flights internal to get there, and literally middle of nowhere. And I think it's like a 20-mile hike to camp, is what I was told.
Yeah,
10 to 20-mile hike to camp, which I assume is up the top of somewhere. And to hunt like a very rare species of bighorn too, like a species that not many people get to hunt, and it's with the guys from the outfit, not actual hunters.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting because these guys guide that stuff.
Oh, I think it's going to be next level again. And it'll open your eyes to things and just make you go like, because you obviously did the mountain goat hunt this year, or filmed a mountain goat hunt. It's just, you do more of those things. And again, it changes your perspective on life. Like I remember thinking that my work leading up to America was really tough. And then I went and did America. And that, like, again, it's something that I elected to do. Like, you can't be like, oh, the hunting's really tough. Like, hunting is my hobby, my lifestyle. Yeah, it was a tough hunt, but it's not like some hardship on my life. I chose to wake up at 3 a.m. every day. I chose to go to bed at 11 p.m. every night. I chose to give in a calorie deficit. So you can't like, leading up to that, I worked really hard at vet. Doing that hunt, my hardship level went to a 10. Like that hunt was super difficult. Do I walk away from that being like, oh, I'm never going to do that again? No, it's like the sooner I can do that again, the better, because then it makes my work, when I went back to work, I was like, had lost 6 kilos, so tired, but like it rejuvenated me because I just spent this like magical 30 days or whatever in America with my brother doing a hunt that I'll remember forever. Like, and our relationship will never be the same again. It's so much like better because we know that we pushed each other to the limits. We had tough conversations. We yelled, swore at each other on the mountain, had tough confronting conversations because we're both sleep deprived, fatigued, hungry, all this stuff, cold, and I thought he should have been doing something. He thought I should have been doing something at times. And it's just stuff that you go, all right, hey, at the end of the day, like I hear what you're saying, but we're both here for the right reasons. And yeah, that has merit, that doesn't have merit. Like, let's switch on, let's keep going, like achieve this goal. Like, it's cool when you do enough things like that. And like the sounds of a 3-person plane scares the shit out of me. But what's on the other side of that sounds like insane and intense and like what I want to experience. So it's like, yeah, you put up with that uncomfortability. Like it's easy to say from here, but like it's just, that's life. The more you put yourself in those situations where you're not sure of the outcome, but you're like, through doing that process or that thing, it's going to like change my perspective is pretty cool.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think like all the good things come at the back end of hard things. And I think backcountry stuff strips a lot of everything out, and it's very black and white that way. Like I was on a 3-seater plane from Anchorage to this place along the coast where we hunted these mountain goat, and it was weird because we had to weigh every single thing, like boots down to everything. And he's like, the pilot's like, oh, we're heavy, and we had to fly like under clouds, around storms, between mountains. Like it was pretty rough and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't fun. Oh, but yeah, that's a lie. It was heaps fun, but it was like kind of nerve-wracking.
Oh, I couldn't imagine it. Like, I'm afraid of heights and get motion sick.
Yeah.
So for me, that's like double-edged sword of just like negative. But then I think if I could sit there and try and be like present in that, and again, speaking about being present, like, and acknowledging that your like pilot is so skilled to duck under planes and deliver you to this tiny little parcel of like an airstrip in the middle of nowhere that no one else gets to do. It's like, that's pretty cool. Like, you can tough it for a little bit. Like,
it was crazy. And like you say, being present, I look out the window and I'm looking at like a glacial melt in like this turquoise blue water and these beautiful like icebergs. And then you look to the other side and there's just like this mountain range that seems to go for eternity. Like, humans would never live there.
Yeah.
And probably there's patches of mountain face and rock face that no one's ever stood on. And
it makes you feel small. Definitely humbles
Alaska
you.
makes you feel small too. Like, you land and you're like, I'm so alone.
See, I didn't get that in Montana. I can understand like in parts of the US you would, but like Alaska, 100%. New Zealand to a degree, like you get that a little bit with some of the mountains. You're like, oh, we're so alone here. But you remove yourself from that spot and you move down the range and you're like, oh no, I feel like
there's
back
a road
connected to humans. Whereas, some of those places in like Alaska would be, from what I've heard and can like visualize, just next level. Like, literally a plane flies you in there, drops you off, and it's like, we may or may not be able to get you in X amount of days depending on weather. It's like, good luck.
Yeah, you just hope you bought enough food, man.
And that's where like the relationships that you build with those people that you're with are like, but it comes down to a lot of these outdoor pursuits because things can go wrong even on like a chital deer hunt in North Queensland very, very quickly. Say someone falls, an arrow slips out of the quiver and hits someone in the leg or an artery, or like tourniquet on quickly. Like, are you going to be like delivering a real world experience? Like, are you assessing, are they conscious enough to like survive me going to try and get a car or get this and get do I hit the EPIRB? Can I get the car? Can I walk them out with me? Like, that's just a chital deer trip. And then you're talking about stuff like in Alaska, it's the same as a diving trip. Whilst like, you've got the boat, you've got like your mates there on a diving trip with the boat and stuff, things can go wrong so quickly just doing these like pursuits, which is why I think the relationships that you form doing these cool things and these hard things that we do and we just call hobbies. But some people are like, oh, that's crazy. I've got family members that do really cool stuff that I think is like out of my comfort zone, and they go, there's no way I'd ever step foot in the ocean with a shark. And I'm like, yes, I'm in the ocean. Yes, there are sharks in the ocean. But it's not like, it's like, it's if you're seeing it as like this thing where they're like right next to each other, it's like, it's more linear where there's like hundreds of meters or miles of separation. There are moments when there are sharks, like if you shoot a fish, and you just be prepared and aware for that, and you have a dive buddy and the boat's nearby and all these things. But like, to try and articulate that to people sometimes, it's like it's hard to,
It is, and the shark thing's odd because people think that the sharks are out to get you. Same as people think snakes are. And like 99% of the time, they're not.
No.
And they're just either defending themselves or whatever. Some sharks are dickheads. Like there's a lot of sharks there but most of the time, like reef sharks and stuff just want your fish. But then they have that thing where they're so in sync with everything that they can tell when you panic and you start kicking sporadically and everything, and then you rile sharks up and then they get like a bit itchy and on edge, and that's when people get bitten as well. I think it's just one of those things where like objectivity, like just going there and just going, it could go wrong, and you take that risk with everything. You take that risk getting into your car every day.
But
people aren't scared of other drivers a lot of the time.
That I was about to say, and that's the example I use like 90% of the time. I'm big on analogies and love using analogies, but like I'll have an uncle from Melbourne say, oh, how can you go diving up there in Queensland? I'm like, well, the visibility is normally 10 meters when I dive, like especially out on the reef. So I can plan my dives. I've got a dive buddy. I've prepared. I'm going out there sober, like all these things. Like eliminating the risks, but you're happy to like drive on a freeway or a highway or, jump in between trams and buses and things like that and, duck across pedestrian crossings, and that screams way more risk to me just because of what you're used to, I guess. So it's I can understand where they're coming from, but I think it's one of those things, once you experience it, you go, okay, like I can take a step back. Not every shark is out to kill you. It's I think our body's way of checking and going like, are you sure you want to do this? Like there are risks there, like stop and think about it for a second, but then being able to go, yep, there are risks and I'm going to prepare for it and then accomplish it or achieve it or push past it is important. Like, because there are risks in everything. Like just going to work here every day in Melbourne is a massive risk. Like you're going to get stabbed by a junkie on the train. You can't, you know what I mean? Or is it, things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's all like, I think it's primitive as well, because the whole primitive purpose of humanity is to survive and breed. As far as we know, it's like instinctive. So like you're trying to do the most amount of reward for the least amount of risk in everything that you do, which is why I think a lot of people take the easy route a lot of the time, because it's easy to take your paycheck and then do nothing outside of that, and then have your weekends and do nothing and all that sort of stuff. Oh,
and the bare minimum, if it's giving you enough of a dopamine hit, is like, it's like, why push past that? Why do that next little hard thing? But it's funny because the more you do those hard things, the more you get it ingrained in your belief system and your like discipline system as to like, that's the bare minimum, because it's so easy to achieve. And once you do a few hard things that you thought were like hard, like going for a 3K run, are now like the bare minimum for a day. But then by doing that, you realize that it's also like optimized so many other things. But there is like a point where, for me, I'm realizing now anyway, is like, because again, I'm very disciplined, and it's like, where do you stop? Is there a stop? Like but I think it's all where you're at and where you're comfortable with. Like things that I do now, I wouldn't have been comfortable with 2 years ago. Things that I thought I wanted to achieve and do and have achieved now, it's like, what's the point? Because my circumstances have changed. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so much to life. It's a constantly moving puzzle board that you're like, just do the best that you can at that moment and think like, what would I want to do tomorrow, and try and get closer to there, whilst also going, today is good too. Like, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's the momentum shifts too. So like being adaptive to change, and then your momentum shifts. So you might be very disciplined physically, like you train shit tons, but given your circumstances with whatever, you might hunt lots, you might have hunted lots last year or something, but given your circumstances now, you're like, I'm not hunting as much. But instead of being wigged out by that, and that throws a lot of people off, like, I need to hunt more and I need to do this and do that. But if you don't really pay a lot of attention, like I don't, like I love fishing and all of this stuff, but I don't really force myself to go out on the weekends and everything like that. It's not my big driver anymore. I love going out still. I love fishing and all of the hunting and everything, but my momentum and my priorities have shifted into business, being a dad, all of that sort of stuff. So I still have the same amount of energy. I still have the same amount of discipline. I've just taken it from something and reapplied it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you don't build that from a baseline, you always remain at that level. And I think people get, what's the word I'm looking for? Not lazy, like just content, I guess. Content with the bare minimum. And like a perfect example.
Do you think it's comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's not for me, but I think people like yourself and myself are probably outliers in that, where I can't assimilate with the general public most of the time. But I think like one of the things that I've discussed multiple times and it just popped into my head, I've got a long list, but this is one of them, is like superannuation. So you can earn like $140,000, $150,000 a year, work from, and I've done this, like I actually know these stats because I used to do this stuff, is federal government from early 20s to retirement, and forecasted on your wage at 140, 150K a year, and that being a static, you've only got like $1 million and a bit by the time you're 67.
Yeah.
You spend it all the time. By the time you're 83, you've spent it. It doesn't take into accurate account the inflation, because like post-COVID, inflation's just shot through the roof. Like people can barely keep up. So it hasn't forecast that properly. I also don't think it takes into account that, oh yeah, like it super's tax free. It comes in, you get paid it into your superannuation account pre-tax. Yeah, but you also pay what I think 15% tax to take it out.
Yeah.
So like the government's got its finger up your ass anyway, and it's not enough. Like you work like a dog till you're almost dead, and then you go, okay, now I'm 70 or 67 or whatever it is. Now I'm going to choose to live life.
Yeah.
When you could have been living it the whole time, and you are to a degree, but everyone's got all these hopes and dreams that they put off. Oh, I can't wait till I retire to buy a caravan and travel Australia, which is fine, but like, why are you waiting?
It's the opportunity cost.
Find a different way.
Yeah, it's the stuff that you can do now, like for me at 30, is going to be so different to 40, to so different at 50, to so different at 60. So it's like, I need to work out what I can do now that I won't be able to do in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and do it now with urgency. Otherwise, I'm never going to do it. Because it's no point being like, yeah, I'm going to go to Alaska and do a brown bear hunt, DIY, where I have to get flown into a place. I have to be X fitness level.
You can't do that.
And if I can't do that, if I can't find time to do it now, if I don't want to do it now, that's fine. But if I think I want to do it later, it's like, try and maybe do it now. That's where like, and being like, trying to like, again, I find that people do this on a micro scale with like, I used to do it with a previous partner with, I wanted to go hunting that weekend because I get very few weekends of hunting off. And it was almost like a form of like laziness of like, it would be hard to have the activation energy for me to wake up or finish uni, have everything packed and ready. Like it takes prior preparation, have everything packed and ready so that straight after uni on a Friday in Townsville, I drove straight out to Charters Towers, then to the property, and I'm hunting Saturday, Sunday. I've articulated that to my partner at the time, like, yep, I'm going to be away or whatever. It takes like energy to do that. Whereas if she just has one little conversation and it's not out of malicious or like trying to take away from your dreams or your hunting or whatever, and says, oh, do you want to come shopping with me this weekend? It's nice to be like, yeah, I do. But it's also nice to be like, hey, I can go shopping with you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and think of it from that perspective. Is there a chance we can do it then? It might mean that you have to do shopping and then social netball or shopping and then study or shopping and then look after the kids on Tuesday. So it makes Tuesday a bit busier. But if you can identify like, because I just find it easy, and I do this sometimes myself, to be like, you use what someone else wants or what you think would be better for someone else as like an excuse to cut your dream or your choice or your whatever. And that's compromise in life to a degree. You've got to do that all the time, especially with relationships, friendships, work, all this type of stuff. But it's very easy in today's society to find yourself going, oh, I won't go hunting this weekend because there's a party Saturday night that you kind of don't even really want to go to, but you feel like if you don't go to it, you're going to have FOMO. And then you miss that hunting weekend that you could have gone. The next one's in 3 months' time. Your things change. You actually do need to work in 3 months' time, whereas you did have that free weekend that's just gone. You went to the party, you got a bit drunk, you end up hungover on the Sunday. Like, you kind of regret it, but you're kind of glad that you went. It's just like, prioritize what you want to do, make that clear, and do it. Like, it's just, I don't know. That's why this year I haven't really got that many plans, but I'm like, I'm just going to do things that I want to do at that moment and go from there, like, which I'm excited for.
I think the message here is create your own opportunities. Don't wait for something else to create them for you is probably the big one. And then I'm a person that just goes, yes, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather go, oh yeah, we could, but this bad thing will happen or we risk this. And nah. It's a good idea, and I'm a risk taker, an educated risk taker. Like if it has a good opportunity of paying off, then I'll just say yes. Oh, we can't afford it. Yeah, we can't afford it now.
Yeah.
So now between now and whenever I'm doing the thing, I need to figure out how to get the money to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll figure that out while I'm going along. But like most of the time, I just try and say yes, unless it's a blatantly stupid thing to do. And I guess I was just pulling up my phone is like, and just jog my memory. I shared this to my story last night is I'm reading The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. A really good book. I read it a long time ago and then I forgot about it. And I only just got another copy again, which I'll lend to you because I think you'll resonate with it quite well. But it hits on this point, and this is some dude in like, I think 160 AD, like a Roman emperor in 160 AD. Remember how long you have... I'm going to start again because I really want to fluidly explain this. Remember how long you have been putting this off, how many times you have been given a period of grace by the gods and not used it. It is high time now for you to understand the universe of which you are a part, and the governor of that universe of whom you constitute an emanation, and that there is a limit circumscribed to your time. If you do not use it to clear away your clouds, it will be gone, and you will be gone, and the opportunity will not return. And like I've got that circled in biro on that book.
Yeah. No, it's powerful.
Yeah, I think, and like that's someone who ran the Roman Empire for a long period of time and was one of the most loved and successful dictators in the world.
That's where what you were saying and alluding to before about if there's something that it stirs something in you, like that's this year for me. James and I, again, I was in a pretty shit place coming out of 2024, probably like the lowest that I've been in my life, and didn't really want to do this hunting full chat with James and talk about America for the year because I'm trying to buy a house at the moment. I'm trying to work out, like I'm essentially unemployed, homeless, like all these things. And I could easily dwell on that being like, I've just had, like a breakup, unemployed, homeless, all these factors. Or I can go, I'm healthy, fit, wealthy, the wealthiest I've ever been, potentially have vet work, potentially have the guiding that I do, potentially have twin elements, and any unknown level of income that I could go and work at Woolies if I wanted to, or Bunnings. Like, there are so many opportunities for me to be in 2025 succeed. And I think what I was going to say is that like James and I sat down with Hunting Fool and had this meeting, and I walked out of that being like, I'm back, like I'm invigorated. I don't even know if I'm going to draw this tag, but and I don't know if like I have like, I'm trying to buy a house and got this mortgage that I'm going to have to be paying off, don't have a job, don't have anything. But I was like, I know that future Ayden would love to go to America if it can work. Yep, sign me up. I'll make it work. And like you said, it might just be, yep, in 2 weeks we're going on a diving trip. You might go, oh, do we have time off to do that? We need to do all this work in the backyard, fix that fence, blah, blah, blah. It's like, work like a dog. There's so many hours in the day to achieve. If you sit down and like, I probably too much write a to-do list because you got to almost do a to-do list, not so that it gets achieved and not it's procrastination to do the thing. But again, that's a process that I've got a lot better at. But it's like I'll work through a to-do list and it's so satisfying smashing that out and achieving like, a set amount of things for the day. Or like there are things that I just know will not leave my frame of mind, but it's those little mundane things that I'm like, oh, and remember to do that. That's not necessarily like right there in my attention span that I'll put on a to-do list. Whereas the big things I'll obviously just go and get done. And something about starting with the most important or the most valuable or the most meaningful is really like important in my opinion. It's the same with like relationships. Don't F around with like 20 mates that you don't get much meaning from. Make sure your relationship with your 5 mates are maintained, or your partner, or, because there's so many people out there, and like that's what I'm learning is so many people in life that you'll come across, but it's like you've only got X amount of resource to actually share. So share them properly with who you can like do that with, and make sure you're getting meaning from things. Because if there are relationships that you're not getting meaning from, get rid of it. Like in my opinion, it's just give chances and then get rid of it. Like life's too short otherwise. Like again, it's just attracting your resources from things that are important.
I agree 1000%. And I feel like people I feel like it's not the things that they're dealing with aren't that bad, where it's not making them choose a different path. It's like, oh, I don't really like those people, but they're friends with my missus or my brother or whatever else. And I feel like I'll just bite my tongue and I'll tolerate it. And it's not that bad because I'll be gone this afternoon or this evening and I won't have to worry about seeing them again. But whereas you could say, it's probably not the best explanation, but you could just remove yourself from that and go do something that you enjoy, that's productive, or have the conversation with, say, your partner, using that example, and say like, I respect that you like those people, I don't like those people. Can we work out a way where we can minimize my exposure to them because they don't add value to my life? But I'm here for you, and I'll be here to help you, and I'll be a part of your relationship with those friends. But I want to limit my exposure to them because they don't add value to my life. Which touches on, I guess, your initial point a fair while back now, is actually communicating your opinions of things and not...
It's boundaries too, I think would be a good word.
That is a good
everything
word.
You just said there made me think like boundaries are so important. Like, Wade, I do this, but I don't like that. Can we just avoid that topic, or talking about that topic, or doing those things? Like, you know, whether
we disagree on a point, political point, whatever.
Every time we do that, it makes a negative connotation to the experience. There's no point hitting on that. Or, you know, like, I don't like doing that, or when I see you do that, it makes me uncomfortable. Can you please not do that? And if that person respects you and values you enough, they won't do that thing. If they continually do it, then again, you got to go, okay, I've communicated, which is massive. I've been vulnerable enough to communicate something that is important to me. They don't see that as important based on their continual actions to do it. Now it's important that I cut that from my life. And it's tough, like, to do that. But it's like liberating when you do it and you go through that hard thing and you go, holy shit, I've just created space for someone else to enter my life that does respect that decision. And the smaller your circle gets, the more like refined and concentrated to like for me, for example, with my hunting circle, it's like you, my dad, my brother. It's like tiny. Most of it's with James. And it's like just based on like what we get out of it. It's like it could be 100 people, and like, but if I go out and they're doing risky shots and it's like, yeah, he's a nice guy for most of the time, but he's doing risky shots and it makes me feel uncomfortable and this, like, it's just not worth it. It's like, pull that back and go with people that only do good shots and aren't out to just kill everything. Do you know what I mean? And you slowly align everything to the point where this is my version of hunting.
Yeah.
And it's like that with life, fishing, like work, everything. Like,
one thing I find, like, you and I are very similar on a lot of things in life, which is why I think we gel so much. But I find with you, when we go hunting, for example, that I could walk around with you all day and we not talk and I still have an amazing time. I find it so weird. When we dive, like, obviously we're not really talking much when we're diving because our mouths underwater, but like the same principle is like, I enjoy being out with you. And for some reason there's like a non-verbal enjoyment, like the conversation, you don't feel like you have to do anything and it just sort of works. I don't know. I've never been able to explain it, but you make me think of it often. There's
it's a weird enduring of like hard things too with someone like that I was alluding to. Like, I remember that stalk we did when we went and hunted Chiddle and we dragged across that mimosa patch. So for those that don't know, mimosa is like this thorny, prickly bush that's like an acacia sort of scrub, and it's got like an inch long thorn. And Wade and I like butt crawled, I don't know, a couple hundred meters across this opening to get to this mob of deer that were like bedded. And I remember just like, we talked during that because we were so far away from these deer, but there was just no approach. And we were just like, oh man.
Making jokes.
Like,
and
you'd
shit.
hear him just go like, oh fuck. And like, you know, there'd be like pulling a thorn out of his ass or something or whatever. He's like stubbed his toe on a big thorn or whatever. But like, I remember just thinking like.
We had boots off too then.
Oh, yeah, everything. It was like.
It was cooked.
It was 40 degrees, sweating balls, hot, humid, just like in the sun. Yeah, camera gear, bows, like on our laps, butt scooting and like on these prickly things. And it's just like doing that with a mate, not being able to like, being half serious, not being able to talk about it. And then knowing that this is only the start of the stalk. You're going to get in on a mob of chiddle deer and then have to spend the next potentially like day or afternoon stalking these deer. It's just like, then the stalk goes either way and you just laugh about it. Like or you either achieve the highest of highs and shoot that deer, get that meat, you know, go through that really tough process to get it done, or you don't. And then you've got the excitement of geeing each other up to get it done on the next one or next trip or whatever. But it's just like, yeah, not being able to like not have to verbally like express everything and just know that person gets you is really rewarding too. Like, and that's especially with like those diving trips and stuff. It's like, nowadays, I think with hunting in particular and diving, I was thinking about it, there's like this anticipatory like joy where you like book a trip and it's probably nearly as fun or exciting as the actual hunt itself. Because like, I tell you now, like booking a trip to New Zealand is the best thing ever. Best thing you'll ever do. Hunting in New Zealand, beautiful, spectacular, like picturesque. But fuck, it sucks.
Nasty ass country, man.
Like, it sucks. Like, you go there and you like get out of the airport and it's just windy, cold, like, and we've had good weather days and then just terrible weather days. And it's like, it's hardship. It is a hard hunt. Like, hats off to the guys that are over there doing it all the time. It's the same, I reckon if they came and hunted chittle deer, they'd be like, this is the hottest, worst thing ever. So it's like what you know. But for me, the idea of hunting in New Zealand is so exciting. No, I'm going to go over there and like film it or hunt it with you and James or whatever. So spectacular. I look forward to it. I like get fit. I do all these things to make sure that trip is like going to be a success. And then once you're over there, there's no like, you can't do anything. It's like a lot of it is just putting in certain inputs to try. And the more you do it, the more you prepared all these types of things, your mental focus on like a goal is going to help. But there's a certain element of you're hunting wild animals in wild places. Like it's a hard thing to do. It might not go as you want which is like, make no mistake, we go there to hunt and shoot an animal and kill it and, you know, whatever. But the older I've got, the more I do it with like these close mates, it's like less about the kill and more about like that whole arc in the middle. The whole like process is really, really cool. And that's kind of what I'm working out with life too, is like, and it's hard that I've learned this lesson on the back of like, I keep going back to this relationship, but it's just like, I don't consider my life as having many hardships. I've done like uni for 5 years to become a vet student, sure, hard. I've got mates from uni that say, it's the hardest thing ever. I wish I never did it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, fuck that. Like, what do you mean? We basically like drank piss for 5 years, lived away from home, became independent. Like, I just look at what I did in 5 years there, and it was like, meet so many incredible people, make so many good mates, like lived away from home, set up a guided hunting business, got fittest that I've ever been, drank the most alcohol I've ever drank, but it was like in limited moments, but also like achieved something that, 100 other people in my year did, and that was it. Like a lot of people failed, a lot of people got through, but it's like, it's a hard thing, and it's like, it makes so many other things easier. And like, I think for me, having the background of hunting and like work ethic and fitness and just all these things made vet like a 5-year commitment to myself that, hey, you're going to do this, you're going to get it done. You might not like parts of it, but try and make the most of it. Go diving when you can, study as hard as you can. But I've never been the type of person that 3 days out from an exam was like, oh, I need to learn more, like, and stressing and crying and wasting a day of studying because I've got these chronic stress episodes like some people do. If I'd done everything I could before like an exam or a test, I would go spearfishing on a Sunday and sit the exam on a Monday because it gave me mental clarity to just like relax. And I was never like a HD student, but I did well at uni. And it's just like one of those things that like, do I look back and go, oh, I got a HD or a D? No, I look back and go, oh, I went on that diving trip with Rennie and Wade and James, and we slayed up at, you know, X Reef and shot some trout. Like, again, you got to work out what like fills your cup. And that's where, lately going through like certain things, it's like, I think the last couple of years for me, I was so set on like sacrificing, which comes easy to me, to set myself up for that nest egg, which we were talking about earlier. In 2 years, I'm going to finish that job in Catherine Vet Care, and I'm going to work, be able to then do whatever I want and buy a house and live with my partner and stuff. And the fact that the partner side of it's gone, straight away my reaction was like, oh, it's been a failure. And then I remind myself, like, no, it hasn't. You've learnt so much. Like, yes, while that's like very disappointing and saddening and stuff, you've actually achieved so much in 2 years, to the point that you've put yourself out there and like done things that most people never do. You've saved up all this money to now buy a house wherever you want, like healthy deposit. You can not even buy that house. You can go and spend all that on a trip to Alaska. I might come to Alaska with you and we can go hunt sheep or whatever.
Oh,
like, there's so many possibilities, but it's all driven on the back of like that hard work ethic, discipline. Like, it's just, and again, life changes and moves. And thank God it is just a relationship that's ended and not like a parent dying, because these are real world things that happen. Someone might get cancer. So it's like, life is so short. You've got to do at the moment what you think is the best thing to do. Book that trip, book that thing, buy that house. You might not be able to afford it, but you can pick up, work with your partner, do whatever, and you'll make it work if it's important to you. If not, you'll learn from it. Like, it's not that like,
people
troubling.
apply too much thought to a lot of very simple things, and a lot of emotion, too much emotion to very simple things too. And with uni, for example, like, just don't give yourself the option to quit early. Like, I have to commit 5 years to this, and just brute force your way through it and do what you need to do to get there. And then put that in your back pocket, which is like one thing I would probably, excuse me, say to any younger person. Like, I've got a trade, like I'm a carpenter by trade, and I'm very glad I did it. I would have been glad if I went to uni as well, but like committing and completing something that young at age gives you a little bit of satisfaction. I was never a great carpenter either, but I have that qualification and I've got the tools and stuff now. So if my life shit the bed tomorrow, I'd hook up that trailer to my Land Cruiser and I'd drive to some job site and say, hey, can I come work?
Yeah.
And I would figure it out. And I think like a lot of people that don't have, I'm not saying you should have a backup plan. I don't necessarily think that's, because then you're not committed to your main goals, or not as committed. But I think like having a safety net that requires no attention and no effort.
Do you think
that makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. But that's where like I come from like a privileged family, very like,
Same.
you know, my grandparents came here from overseas, had nothing, have worked extremely hard to get what they've got. My parents have worked harder again to get what they've got. I'm hopefully going to continue that. It's like one of those things that I can't sit here and be like, oh, life's tough, like it's this and this, look what I've done by myself, blah, blah, blah. Because I know at the end of the day, if I worked like a dog for 2 years and all that, I put it on an investment stock or something and it disappeared and my relationships fell apart, everything crumbled, like absolutely everything crumbled. My car got stolen and burnt, my camera gear and everything's gone. I've lost everything that I hold dear to me. I can call my parents and say, hey, do you mind if I come back and start again from scratch? I'm going to work at Woolies or whatever and just start. Like bare minimum, they're not going to make me pay rent. They'll let me sleep on the floor. Like that's the worst thing in my mind. Like, but even in society, I feel like the bottom floor, like the floor for everyone is like raised compared to what it was 30 years ago for like my parents, in the sense of like, there's so many like safety nets in the form of like government subsidies and things this day where like, even during COVID, I know that there were people who weren't working because their work got put off and they were getting paid more than they ever got paid for working. So it's like, what incentive is that giving you to actually go and work? It's like, I'll just sit at home and do what, like play Xbox or whatever people did. So I think like as bad as you think it can get, it probably can't even get that low. But then as you were saying, like having a backup plan, like, you know, you can do is good, but hopefully never having to use it is great. And like to go with that uni thing, I remember this is just like when you were talking earlier, I just thought about it. And like, I think discipline is one of the biggest qualities you can have.
That's a safety net in itself as well.
I was going to say, because I remember at uni not being the brightest, not being the smartest, all these things, not being the hardest working, but I made a promise to myself, and it's like something that I do well with like even my fitness is like showing up every day. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to go to like every lecture, because if I miss a lecture, I've then got to rewatch it, and it's 1.5 times slower to rewatch than it is to just go to the lecture. Yeah, it might be a pain in the ass, but like that put me in good stead, because then I remember by the time exams came, I had physically heard a lecturer talking to about every single slide like that in that lecture. So for virology, lectures 1 to 30, the test was on 1 to 30. I had been to lecture 1 to 30. So the information's in there somewhere, whether I studied it and remembered it or wrote notes on it, that's up to me at home. That's like that extra work. But as a bare minimum, I did the discipline thing of going to every lecture. There are some people that will never go to every lecture and lie to themselves like, oh, I'll do it at home, never watch it at home. And then they get quizzed on a question that they've physically never seen before. Whereas for me, the discipline to do that was like, yep, I've got it in there somewhere. Like it's a starting point. And that's just how I work. It's the same that I can use for fitness. So I might not feel like training, but I'm going to put my shoes in the car. And when I finish work in Katherine at 5 p.m. from the clinic, my shoes are in the car, my singlet's there. Like there's no excuse for me to go home and grab something. It's in the car. I'm going to go straight to the gym. Mm-hmm. And then once I get home, I'm going to look at my dog and go, oh shit, I should walk, or I should run him. Like it's just the sooner you like are disciplined enough to like just do it consistently, then you begin to like enjoy it. And there's this thing that I talk about a lot about like negative motivation being really important. So for me, like training lately has become really positive in my life, especially during what I've been going through. Like it's like a release for me. Like the more I run, the less I think about other things. The more I train, the better I feel about myself, like all these things. Initially with training, for me, it was, I don't want to be fat and lazy. Like that is very negatively associated as like, there's not like my motivation to train was I don't want to be fit and lazy, and I don't want to like not be able to do stuff with my kids eventually. Once you do, that's enough activation energy for me to start doing things. And then after about 2 weeks of like, oh, I'm starting to feel good, get a bit of a habit up, do it like religiously and sort of like start doing it. That's when the positive motivation for me comes in, like, oh, I'm starting to look good in the mirror. I'm starting to feel good. Girls are noticing me, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that positive like reinforcement is. Weights that I was doing 2 weeks ago that was super hard are so easy now. Running 3K 2 weeks ago is super easy. Then you start looking at things like, again, that's what's going to challenge you. What seems far away? A marathon? Yeah, I'm going to do a marathon. Like, that was one thing that I went through with this breakup. And I remember just being like, whenever I was not working, like flat out, I was like, I'm not going to sit at home and be a miserable prick. I'm going to train. So I remember starting to run, and then I was starting again. The negative motivation was I don't want to sit at home and be sad, which is so like morbid and whatever. But for me, it was like, I've got way better things to do. I want to get fit. I've got life to live. Like, fitness will never be a bad thing in my opinion. And like, running from your problems obviously is, but it wasn't that for me. And then I've always talked about doing a marathon one day. I'm just going to do it. And I remember like in the space of about 6 weeks, a month and a half, I'd started running like 5K every day and then did a 10K. And for me, like, fitness has always been like something that I do consistently in the background. And I remember like running the 5K and doing good times, and then running the 10K and having a similar like kilometer pace for the 10K and going, oh, that was good. And then gave it a few days, and then I was like, I'll do a 15K, and stepping it up to slowly getting closer to that goal that I set of the like marathon or whatever. And then I remember just getting to the point where I'd done a 15K, felt good, did the 22K or whatever it is, half marathon, felt good. And was like, one day I was just like, finished work at 2:00 in the afternoon and was like, stuff it. I've talked about it for, my whole life that I'll do a marathon one day. I'm prepared now to do it, and I wasn't prepared. But in my head, I honestly believed that I could do it. And it was just like, the only thing stopping me is me, like, at this point. And yeah, literally went and did it, like, can say that I did it. I cramped like a motherfucker, had a mate bring me out like pickle juice, but still like ran a sub 4-hour marathon on 6 weeks of training. And in Catherine, like, I'd work that morning, finished at like 3:00, went and ran in 40-degree temperature, like no route, no nothing, just on Strava for 42Ks or whatever it was. And I look back and I'm like, at the time it was hard. And then as soon as I finished, I was like, that actually was not that hard for what I'm going through. I remember thinking like, that was not even difficult. And people are like, how are you doing that? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, I set a mental goal out in my head. I set the process of how I thought I would train up for it. I wish I did it differently now, and I will if I ever do one again. But it's just like, the furthest run I'd done ever before that was like 10 or 12K or something. So it's just one of those things that like, what you think is unachievable, if you work towards it and gradually do incrementally things like directed at that, like book that trip and then dedicate time to doing it, you'll achieve it. Like, the only limitations are on like yourself, you put on yourself.
Yeah, I'm very similar with running as well. Like, I ran a lot the year just gone, and I did a lot of not tracking at all, and I would just run, and I would say I'm going for a run, and I would run until I was finished. And some days, like, I was so emotionally taxed where I would just run until like I was almost like debilitated, and then I'd stop and I'd be like, fuck, I'm a long way from home. And then I'd be like, well, I could walk back and bitch out, or I could run back. And I'm pretty sure I could run back, and I ran back. And I don't even know how long, like, from running roughly how far you ran when you run enough. But some of them I just was like, no, never tracked. I never tracked a run for probably 12 months.
Yeah.
And every run I ran at least 5 kilometers. And probably the biggest would have been between 10 and 15, I reckon, maybe more. And would just run for hours until I was finished running, until I'd had enough of running.
See, that's like cool. For me, again, and this is like, I think it's like something I've learned over the last 2 years. It's probably just me as a person. Like, I've been told a lot, like, you're so like regimented, but that's just how I work. Like, I analyze things, I see things, that's how I do it. Like, I wake up in the morning, I'll do emails for Twin Elements, I'll do reels for Twin Elements, I'll do all this stuff. Like, it sort of fits in a way that flows for me. And for me, I sort of feel guilty. Like, I run and I run fast. I'll run 5K in 20 minutes and I'm done. Like, I love running, but if I spend any more time on it, it feels like I'm detracting from like all the other things I've got to do for the day. Whereas I know exactly what you mean, because some of those bigger runs, it was just like, I could do this all day, and it's something nice about just like feeling the best runs I did was no stimulus, no audio, nothing, and people were like, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, hearing your own foot patter and going and breathing and stuff and regulating like the pace off your like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like you know, your footfall and stuff, and hearing that and going, oh, I'm going faster, I'm going too fast, I'm going too slow, blah blah blah, and regulating that, getting your breathing right, and running to a point where you're like, holy shit, I've been doing this for hours, I can't do this anymore. And then going, but you've got no choice. What are you going to do? Stop and walk for the next 20 k's
Get a taxi
back?
home, yeah.
Not an option. It's just like, just keep going. You're not, what are you going to do? Die? Like, again, I remember like the worst thing about when I ran that marathon was I remember nearly crying, just probably because of the mental state I was in. Like in the last few months, I've cried way more than I care to admit than like I have the rest of my life. Like it's just, as I said, been shit at times. But I remember one of the hard things was setting out for myself that goal of running the marathon. And I remember I hit the 25k mark and was running like a 4-minute 10k per kilometer like pace, like quite fast, and feeling amazing, great. And I remember hitting that 25, 26k mark, and it just felt like I got shot. I remember like my left calf went, my left hamstring went, my right calf and quad all cramped at the same time. So I like literally nearly face planted. And I was sitting there and I was like, luckily I was in service down Gorge Road on Catherine, like 25 k's out of Catherine. And I was just basically running down there and about to turn around and do this loop to go back to my house, which was 40 something k's. And I remember just like thinking, fuck, I'm not going to be able to do this goal that I've set to do. Like that's going to be the hardest thing, is just like the one thing I wanted to do for me at the moment was just run this marathon. And going from like the mental battle, it sounds ridiculous, but of running like the 4-minute 10 pace for 25 k's and 20 seconds earlier going, oh, I want to run this in 3.5 hours. And then instantaneously some problem arose. I get this cramps and go, you might not be able to finish it at all, dude. And then going, I just want to finish it. How can I finish it? Made the call. My mate, I started running again and like cramping, and I was lucky I ran such a good pace early, because some of the kilometers between like 25 and 35, I think, were like 8 minutes. So it ended up averaging like 5 minutes 40 or 5:60, not 5:60, but like high fives, and finished under 4 hours. But long story short, my mate brought me out some pickle juice, which essentially like reset the cramps for long enough that I'd run 5Ks, get cramps, swig a bit of pickle. I was running with a jar of like pickled cucumbers. And that was just what I had to do to get home. And then I got home and like, again, stopped recording Strava or whatever I was recording on, and was just like so stoked to finish. And then the fact that I still finished in sub 4 hours, I was like, fuck, stoked. Like to have that hardship of the not thinking I was going to finish, I'll remember more than finishing it. Like once I finished it, I was like, yeah, cool. But the like
you got a spider on your shoulder.
I hadn't felt it crawling on my neck.
Yeah, it's going to have to go. I don't know. It looks mildly venomous. I've been watching it for a little bit, and it's ruined the vibe. But I saw it before and I was like, oh, should I call it out? It looks like maybe just a basic little house spider, but then I looked at it and it's got like black and white stripes on it. I'm like,
Did you see me like?
Just to reinforce your point, I think that having that little hardship type deal makes that a memorable moment, and then the ability to push past, because they're the points that sort the men from the boys with it. Go, oh, you could quit and no one would care, and you go, oh, I'm cramping and like I can't go any longer without injuring myself, and 99% of people will be like, that makes sense, man. Like go home, rest up, get your cramps sorted, and maybe do it another time. Or you can go, that's when you need to self-analyze and go, nah, can I actually still compete? Can my body still cope with this for another 20 Ks? And then you go, if the answer is yes, then you do it. And that's where I quite respect people like Cam Haines, like David Goggins, and there'd be a million of those people that wouldn't be even on social media that you wouldn't even know about in the world. Those guys that can go, they're obviously extreme to the point where it starts to destroy your body, but the mindset principle remains the same, where they can go, well, I can stop and it'd be fine, and I've still done more than everybody else, but I just want to see if I can. And then I get to that point and I go, oh, I've got a little bit more left, I'll keep going. And then like just doing it, which is one of the main drivers why I just decided to run without, I'd take my phone obviously, but I wouldn't track it. I'd never downloaded Strava. Never had a watch. My watch is an analog watch, and I would just run. And I'd do it late at night because that way I'd be mentally okay because I would have got most of my shit done during the day. And I would just run and without a timer and get to the point where I'm like, I'm bored now, or I've stopped thinking about what I need to think about, or I've come good mentally and I've gotten through this hard mind process that I've been going through. And or I've like, I've got heaps of energy, I'll keep going, or I'm fucked, but I'm like emotionally fucked and I just want to like physically destroy myself to sort of balance it out. It's hard to explain, but like physical pain helps you mentally. Healthy physical pain. Not I'm not condoning self-harm. But,
no, absolutely.
Physical.
It's just, again, being uncomfortable for a little bit. Like
physically uncomfortable helps you mental. And then when it compounds, right? So you push past those bits where you should stop. Most of the time your brain tells you to stop and you don't. And you push past that and that compounds. Your brain remembers that. So then the next time you do it, you're fitter and whatever else also, but you come to that point where your brain would normally go, okay, slow down, man, or stop, or do something else, or quit, or whatever. Your brain won't register it, and it'll get a little bit further before it does.
And that's where, on that, the biggest thing I would ever say to anyone about like trying to change their life is stop going from like, oh yeah, I went to work today and that was tough and I got home and like my day's done. It's like, that's the bare minimum to put food on your table. That's like getting nothing else out of the day. Like, unless you absolutely love your work, you work for yourself, like whatever it is, like often if you work for yourself, you probably love it more than like just working at wherever. And I don't want to like dismiss what people do, but like if I was to work at Woolies and go, nah, that's my day done, then that's not like me living my dream or doing anything for me. So that's even with the vet stuff, which I've like worked for a long time to get to and do. I don't see that as like, me working as a vet is like me putting food on the table, me making an income. Unless I go to gym, I don't feel like I've actually achieved anything out of my day for me. That's just my mentality, right or wrong. That's just like how I can articulate that now. But I think in general, like I have this discussion with my dad, with family and friends. They're like, how do you do it? How do you go from preg testing all day to then go and run the 5Ks after work or whatever? It's like,
because you can.
It's literally like the same as, I've got to get to work at 8 a.m. if that's when you start. I have to get to gym at 5:15. If that's because I finish work at 5. I have to get to gym at 5:15 or I'm late to start my shift at work. Like if you start thinking about it as something that you have to do, not just a luxury that you get to do at some point, maybe if you feel like it, remove the feel like it, because you don't get to feel like it at work. Like you're talking to someone who's, and again, it's just different mentalities. Some people have taken 50 sick days in the last 2 years. I've taken none. There were days where I literally, it's too much to have on a podcast, but like had hemorrhagic diarrhea because I'd caught an infection or got food poisoning or something like that, like literally bleeding out of my ass, and worked for 5 days without eating. Like eating and barely drinking, thinking I was going to shit myself in my swag that night because the second I touched like water to my lips, I'd need to go to the toilet. I remember like the vulnerability of climbing out of the cattle crush preg testing, thinking I'm going to shit my pants in front of people that I'm working with. Because like I was still working in 40-degree heat with cramps and stuff, like abdominal cramps, feeling like I was dying.
You probably were a little bit.
Oh, literally like was shedding like parts of my like lining in my feces, like running away. Like it was terrible to even talk about. But it's just like one of the biggest things, I sort of posted this on my Instagram as a 2024 sign off, was like, as an adult, I'm going to butcher it, but like, essentially the biggest thing I realized over the last year is that whether you want to do it whether you like, you might better pull it up, but I'm going to butcher it. But essentially like becoming an adult is realizing that you've just got to do it. You've got to do it, whether you're tired, unmotivated, feel sick, feel shit, feel heartbroken. Like for me, the last few months of work was fucking unbearable. Like talking about like, just isolated, lonely, going from having someone who is like your support, your biggest, like you can do it, babe, like motivator, and then having that stripped away and then not being able to see her because like we're broken up and not having a light at the end of the tunnel after all of this was like definitely the hardest thing I've ever gone through. But there's no way I can say to my work like, hey mate, sorry, I've got to quit. Like, or I can't do that job. I want to sit at home and cry. And like you show up every single day, whether you want to or not, it's just like, that's being an adult and realizing there are bigger things. And for me, it was like, there are cattle in the yards. It's probably bigger proportions than a lot of things. Like a lot of people can, if they are working, 9 to 5, probably can go, oh, someone else will step in and cover my role. Whereas for me, it was like, no, Ayden, you are a vet. You have driven 6 hours to get to this property. You've charged that to this property as mileage. You've now got X amount of days to get 3,000 head of cattle done out of the yards because they've got young calves that are suckling milk. Then you've got to get transported. You've got to pay for helicopters to muster them in and out. Like, it's a bigger system. So that's like, it's sort of a forced mentality is like, no, you've got to do it whether I feel shit, whether I haven't slept. Like, there were some days I'd preg test on 2 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep and driven, and then I'll drive to the next property for 40 days. But knowing like, no, you can't quit. Even if you want to, you can't. Again, there's so many instances where like it's not healthy, but doing it is like so enriching for like who you want to be later as a human. And like, there's so much stuff that people are like, oh, do you regret like going to Catherine? I'm like, fuck no. It was one of the like probably two of the best years of my life in terms of setting myself up now for the future. So I made so, and it sounds like bad because the last few months have been a bit sour, but like so much of it has been like incredible. Like, I've gone on some amazing buffalo hunts, did an amazing bangtang and boar hunt with James and my dad. Like, my friends and partner and like people have come over and visited me, like set up a family with the clinic that I was at. Some of the people that I've met there are like the most generous, nice, welcoming people that you'll ever meet. So like, it's just life. It's just like, there's always a challenge in front of you and you've always got to do like the next thing. But I guess, yeah, sometimes even if you don't want to do it, I'm not saying like do the work that you don't want to do forever, but there is something to going, I don't want to do this right now, but I know that's going to help me in the future. Just do it, like, is part of it.
I agree. I can't load your thing because the servicing is absolutely atrocious. But yeah, I think it circles back to the point. It's like, it's just don't apply too much of anything to it. Just go, this is a goal. I want a six pack. Just do what you need to do to get a six pack. And that's as simple as it needs to be. So like, oh, don't be like, does what I'm doing, what does this action or does this task or does this period of my day, does this work towards me getting a six pack? No, it doesn't. Okay, get rid of it. Don't do it. And whether it's a hard decision or not, do it anyway. Like, make decisions towards your goals. Don't let anything else in there that can't be in there. And there are some non-negotiables like family or work obligations, for example. But what you've applied there is your job is money is a tool to not necessarily, people say money can't buy happiness. I'm fucked if I feel like it's how you spend your money determines that. Because like if I was a schoolionaire, I'd be hunting and fishing and traveling the world and I would be very fucking happy. So like money can't buy you happiness. I don't think that's a technically true term, but using money as a tool to get where you need to get, which is the mindset to have. Like, having money is whatever. It's not the be all and end all. It certainly isn't for me. I like what I quite enjoy is the goal of trying to make money, because making money off your own, like bootstrapping something.
It's backing yourself is essentially what you're doing. And
you learn so much from trying to do it. I really enjoy the game of trying to make money and build business rather than the actual making of money. Like, what's in the bank account doesn't really matter other than what it needs to pay for. But the goal of making money, because that's the commodity in which the world revolves around, is like a goal for me, and which is what a lot of people don't understand either. It's like, oh, you work too much. It's not work for me. It's like, I enjoy it. I enjoy hustling and I enjoy working hard, and I'll do 14 hours, 16 hour, 18 hour days, and I'll work from as soon as I wake up, I might go get a workout in or whatever, and I'll come home and I'll work on the computer all day and edit. And then I'll go to jiu-jitsu or boxing or the gym or whatever else. And then I'll come home and I'll work again. And then I lose track of, my Wednesday might be my Saturday. And I might have Wednesday off and go fishing. Or I might have the whole week off. Or I might work 3 months straight. Or I might travel for a job and then go straight on to another job. And people can't fathom it because they're so regimented into, I get up at 8, I start work at 9, I get home at 5, I cook dinner. I understand you've got children, and I get all that. Like, and the kids have training and they have dance lessons, and I understand all of the other obligations around that. But that's still not an excuse. And you can kid yourself and say that it is, but you're lying to yourself and you're lying to everybody else that you don't have time. Because I can bet you any money, and we've had this conversation before, I can bet you any money that you'll sit down at night and you'll watch some fucking dog shit TV show because you enjoy it and it gives you a little dopamine kick before you go to bed. What about instead of watching that TV show, the father or the husband or the friend or whatever watches while the kids are in bed and you go for a run or you go to the gym, or you do a workout in your house while the kids are asleep because you can't leave. I can't leave the house, I've got kids. Fucking roll a yoga mat out in the lounge room floor and do some sit-ups.
Yeah.
Like, or listen to a podcast or read a book. But I'm jumping subjects again, but another thing that I find problematic is the book reading thing. I'm not a very good reader. I force myself to read because there's a lot of knowledge in books, and I'm trying to get more articulate with conversations that I have with people from this podcast, because this is I love doing this. But I think a lot of people read the books and listen to the podcasts, and let's just use motivational books and stuff that give you skills and business skills and the mindset stuff to grow at life. And they'll read 1,000 books, but they'll apply it to 10% of their life, and their life will remain the same.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes detrimental. So all that time you spent fucking around reading books, you could have read one book and gone and tried to apply it.
Take action. That's the biggest thing. I find myself doing that too. Like, even though I feel like I'm a high achiever in like output, trying to do things all the time, it's like I will often not do things unless I feel like it's perfectly right. Instead of just optimize, like I try to optimize everything to a degree. Like, I'll hear that podcast and then that motivates me, so I'll listen to another one and listen to another one and I remember there was an important time for me. I remember I heard a Modern Wisdom podcast about like the conversation you're not having is what's setting you back, or something along those lines, essentially. And I remember thinking, fuck, what conversations am I not having? I remember it was at the time when I was like, fuck, I want to finish work here at the end of the year in Katherine. And I called my boss at like a ridiculous time. I was driving between cattle work, like I'd been out of service, hit the first town, I think it's like 8:30 at night, called him and said, hey mate, like I'm not sure when I'm going to have service next. I'm just letting you know that in November, I'm finishing up with Katherine Vet Care. I'd been thinking about having that conversation for probably like a month or two before that. And this is like well in advance. This was like, I don't know, maybe April in 2024. But I remember just thinking, you know, for my relationship, for where I'm going next in life, for me, like where I want to live, all these things, I want to finish up here. Even though it's been great, even though I'm still working here, I'm still going to put my best foot forward. And that was just like, I heard that podcast, and I think it was, Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson talking with like Hamosi maybe or something. And they said something about stop putting off tough conversations. And I just went, how can I relate that to me right now? And went, bang, done. I'm going to have this conversation that I've thought about for a month. Did that, and it was like a tough conversation. It was, like, you know, everything right, blah, blah, blah. Done. And then it's just like, from that moment, it was like, and everything that I thought that I then would have to do and organize later on was just like, done. But it's like amazing, as you said, like that activation energy to actually go and do things, like, and just doing it creates motivation to do the next thing. And like what you were talking earlier about, when you were like jumping around between like people, like using excuses that other people put on you, like your spouse or this, and it's too hard and I've got kids and that. It's like, I don't have kids. I don't currently have a spouse. I don't currently have this, but I can talk about, like, I can't talk about a wife or something like that, but I can talk about having those moments in relationships where I thought, and I can't do that because of this. And every single time that I had that thought and said, again, with communication, how can I do what I want to do and not neglect the relationship? It has worked out so much beneficially. And also in hindsight, if there's ever been moments where, like, because I've obviously been in relationships and out of relationships now, plenty of times throughout my life, where there were times where I was like, I won't do that hunt because I should go to that family dinner, or I won't do that that I really want to do, really look forward to, but I'll go shopping, or I'll walk the dogs, or I'll, whatever the excuse is, whatever the thing is, whatever you're like battling what you want to do and what the other person wants to do. And for me, I'm fortunate that it's just been a spouse, whereas like there are some people, it's their kids, and kids obviously, you know, can get chosen to be born, like they are your responsibility. But it's the same, I feel. Like, your kids aren't going to hold a knife to you and be like, no, remember you promised, like this sort of thing. Like, and as long as you can communicate it, like, I can't really remember a time with any partners where I've made a tough decision to go hunting and it's backflipped on me, especially with the right people. And again, if it does become a really issue, maybe you're in a bad relationship. Maybe like if you going hunting and chasing your dream once every 6 weeks, if that's what it is, 'cause some people will do a hunting trip once every 6 months. Like, we're doing it all the time. But if you go, I want to set aside dates on that Anzac Day weekend, and I know that's when normally the holiday season is, and I know that's normally when we're doing a family thing, but like, that's the only time I get off. If you can articulate that 2025 or 2026 Anzac Day, I want to go and do that, and your spouse is like, no fucking way, you've just got to be like, would I be encouraging them if they want to go and do something with their best friends or whatever their hobby is, like do a painting retreat? I don't know or care necessarily what it is. But if you would support them and they don't want to support you, then it works both ways. And it's like, that's something to consider, because it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be just a short day trip, but
there's that level of extreme where it's like there's no alignment in your goals. There's also, and this is coming from personal experience, there's also one that I think is detrimental as well, and you don't think it is at the time, is just like blind support, which is like, you want to do all this stuff and they're like, yeah, go for it, for sure. And then you do what you want. And then you get so blinded by doing what you want that you forget that you have other priorities and other purpose and other people relying on you and all of that sort of stuff. And you make bad decisions. You don't, at the time, you don't know they're bad. You don't realize they're bad because you're like, oh, they don't mind. And when the reality is that they do. And it's fault at both ends, but it's also, I'd say, the majority of your fault, because you chose to not communicate that clearly. But both, I guess. But I think like the point I'm making is you need to find somebody that actually understands. So like, you can say, this is the stuff that you've just explained to me. This is what you want to do with your life. And I go, that's great, man. Sweet. No worries. You'll get no pushback from me. But then if I can't assimilate and understand that at a deeper level, it's hard for us to then gel together and function when things do cross over. Whereas if I'm like, fuck yeah, man, what can I do to help? Not even necessarily help. Like, I totally understand that. And we can have a conversation like you and I are having now, and you can break stuff down to a deeper level and you can communicate at that level. So then you are more motivated. There's a deeper level of understanding. So when there is conflict, which is inevitable in any relationship, you can navigate through that. And you have the tools, the skills, the knowledge, the understanding of each other, the respect for each other to do that. Versus the just blatant like, yeah, go for it, man, sweet. I'll stay out of your way. Kind of hard to make sense of that, I guess. But yeah, stepping back isn't necessarily always a good thing. No,
and that's where like people pleasing is a massive thing. And that's part of something that I've just had experience with in my relationship. And like, my ex is like an amazing person, probably the best person I've ever met. Like, I wouldn't have been with her otherwise. I'm extremely happy by myself. So why would I, go through a long relationship, especially when a lot of it was long distance and stuff. But again, it just like speaks volume as to how good she was and amazing she was as a person and supportive and stuff. And she supported me so much. But some of it, as you just said, is like we only had limited opportunities to see each other because we were doing long distance. She was working in Queensland. I was in the Northern Territory. So I made time for doing those 3 weeks on, 1 week off to go and see her. And my issue that I had with her is like my priority was her. And she would sometimes be like, I would be like, I want to come visit you. And she would be like, no, I want you to go hunting, because that's what I think she thought I wanted to do. And I'd be like, no, I'm going to come see you. And she's like, oh, I can't get time off. And we'd almost like debate like what we wanted to a degree. And I think like her being a people pleaser, I think there's nothing more in her like heart that she would have wanted me to be there 100%.
It feels good to help people. Let me just be clear as well.
And I think if she had have maybe just said like a few times like, hey, I'm struggling with the long distance, I want you to come and visit me for longer. Hey, I'm struggling with this, this and this. Like, and actually put herself first, because it's all good to say like, no, everything's fine. And then when it's not, like, as someone that you're telling it's fine all the time too. And like, there's obviously cues and things that like you've got to see and pick up. But like, if you're similar to what you were saying, if you're saying, hey, I want to go hunting and I want to go to, you know, British Columbia or something, like, and do this stone sheep hunt, blah, 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 blah. And your partner or whatever, or friends is being like, yeah, that's awesome. Go do it. Like, cool. And not understanding that means I'm going to be away for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a month, whatever, at this time of year, when that might fall on someone's birthday or not a birthday, or like, that's a thing that I think is it's easy to say, yeah, go and do it, whatever. But then if you've got like resentment towards that person doing it, or not saying this is the case with like my relationship, this is more to talking about what you were saying, you've got to understand what that actually like means. And when you say like, yeah, go do it, what you're actually promoting, it's like all the preparation and dedication before that. So when you say, geez, you're going to the gym and training a lot, like, why are you doing that? It's like, well, you said go and do this stone sheep hunt. I'm not going to go and like just wing it. It's like, now I am set on a path to do this thing. Yeah. And it's like, it should be in life with, it doesn't matter. Like, it's hard because a lot of like what we're talking about is like a big fishing trip or a big diving trip or a big hunting trip or a big work thing. But it can be like that way with like, if your partner turns around to you and says, hey, I want to play the piano more, or I really love the piano. And you say, oh, I love that. You should do that more. And then you get pissed off every night when you're sitting as a bloody lazy bastard on the couch and she's playing piano, and you go, can you turn that off? Can you be quieter? You're not supporting that dream that she has put in place to play the piano every day. So you got to remember that whilst it's a bit annoying that you might have to like put up with her playing the piano or whatever, like shit analogy, but like it's scalable to everything, to everyone. Like
the communication thing is a huge part of that as well, is right. Like use it for both examples. So the stone sheep hunt, and go, yeah, go for it, go for the stone sheep hunt. Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Just so you know, I'm going to need to train for it. Training for that means this. And this is what it's going to look like 3 months up until I go away. Are you okay with that? Or do you want to talk about it? Can we work that out with the kids' sports games and the training and the yada, 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 and the stuff that you've got on? That's the conversation that I never had.
Yeah.
And that I, like, until recently only realized it, that I was given too much rope, and I inadvertently, it set a precedence that wasn't meant to be set, and then I took it for granted, and it's the detriment of everything. And it is essentially, that's where I was going back. It's mostly my fault. And I'm applying this directly to my life, and I know it's true. And I'm 99% sure that this applies to everybody else in some way, shape or form. I think like there's the blind support, which is good as long as it's broken down to a level and applied to the whole of your relationship, whether that's a friend or partner or parents or kids or whatever, and it's broken down to that level and everything else is taken into account. Because what happens is I'm going on the stone sheep hunt, and all I focus on is the stone sheep hunt because it's the biggest thing I've got to tackle, because everything else is fine, because my partner or my friends or whatever said everything else is okay, go for it. So that opened the doors for me to then just negate the other shit that is important, focus on the stone sheep hunt, for example, while everything else is falling to pieces that I didn't realize until it was broken.
Yeah. Man, this is like heavy because we're talking about stone sheep hunt. I can directly talk about my relationship where I can understand 100% if my partner was like, you prioritize work over me. And it's like, yes, for a period of time, I obviously did. But I, in my heart and brain, thought about you every single day. And we had a great relationship up until the point where like she broke up with me, because so great that I had no fucking clue it was going to happen. Like it blindsided me. And it was like, I remember getting back from work, preg testing, and reading this message. And it basically said like, hey, can we chat? And I was like, holy fuck. Her parents have died, her dog's got out and got hit by a car, like something is wrong. Because that morning I sent her a message at 4 a.m. when I got up for work saying, hey babe, love you so much, have a great day. Like, I know work's been tough, but like, you know, I'm really proud of you. Got a message from her at 6 a.m. that I didn't see until later when I got back in service saying, thanks babe, love you so much, like blah, 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 blah. And then at 4 o'clock, another message. So something had changed between, you know, that time. And it's just like wild to think that, I don't know where I was going with this and trying to like link it back to what you were just talking about, but like you can think that everything is so great, so fine, because you're thinking about that stone sheep hunt. I was thinking about, I've got 2 more months of work left and then I'm out of here to build that future with her forever. And then under the rug, that's just like all minimum, like swept away, gone, like whatever. And it's, again, I think part of it is like I accept so much blame for like working interstate, you know, doing long distance, but that was all stuff that was above board. We'd spoke about. It was never an issue throughout the relationship until it was an issue, obviously, because that's why like we split up. But it's one of those things that like you can focus so strongly on that goal, that stone sheep hunt. For me, it was work and making that money to then better our lives. And if you think everything is, I'm supporting you, all good, like blah, 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 without that communication, it's like, it's tricky.
Life is hard, man, especially for people like yourself and myself. Like have no shame in saying that I'm a very difficult person to understand. I'm a very difficult person to like. I'm a very difficult person to love. And I'm very different to a lot of people. I think very differently to a lot of people. And I'm kind of like an aggressive goal setter. I'm an aggressive person. Like I've definitely calmed down as I've gotten older and learned to control my shit, but I still don't tolerate things I dislike. I don't tolerate them very well. And I can't pretend to be okay with things. Like, it's easy to pick my mood.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah.
And that's detrimental too. And I'm still trying to work out from a lot of hard lessons how to get there and how to get better at it. But I think like if you've got the goal of improvement, I think like you're going all right. But it's interesting because it's good to feel that you're not alone with it. And I feel like a lot of people struggle with things like this. So I think like, and I talk about this stuff on a lot of podcasts, especially lately, because it's obviously relevant in my life. But the more people I talk to, the more I realize people have similar problems, very different sets of circumstances and very different reasoning, but very similar problems if you break them down to a black and white type thing, which is one thing I did want to circle back to is you mentioned Chris Williamson and Hormozy. Very good podcast. Like I really like them. But Hormozy for me is probably one of my favorite speakers, so to speak, because he, love him or hate him, he speaks very simple. Like he simplifies everything. He's very smart, super intelligent, and very stats based and time for value type person. He simplifies everything down to a few sentences. So if you want simplified ways of achieving things, have a look at his content. Some of it's like a little bit ego driven and like very his personal opinion, but a lot of it's very generalized as well and very statistical. And it's a very good way if you don't understand a deeper conversation or a book or a writing or a paper or whatever else, that you can go to his thing and go, in order to achieve this, you need to do this, or these situations apply these rules type thing. Yeah, it's a super good way to at least start the thought process in your brain. On a lighter note, I really want to touch on this NT hunt.
The recent one?
Yes.
Yeah. So it came at a tricky time, again, because like it was like a couple of days to a week or whatever, like when my partner had split up with me and I was like wrecked and anyway, just like thinking about it now, I'm like, fuck, I don't even know how I went on this hunt. Like I was rat shit sort of thing, but I was lucky that I did go with my brother and dad. They came over and I'd sort of told them, because I was trying in the process of obviously trying to like get the pieces back together with this relationship and fix things. I said, hey, I might actually have to like quit this trip, which we've had booked for months, to fix my relationship and work on it. And then was basically told like, no, we're not doing that. Like, go on your hunt, which again, like maybe her being like trying to prioritize my happiness and stuff, but like I was not going to change anyone else's opinion. So I was like, yep, sure, I'm going to go on this hunt and try and enjoy it. So we went up to, like I was living in the Northern Territory, so James and Dad flew in and we did a bit of a buffalo hunt and then went up further north up towards like Coburg Peninsula, which is extremely like rugged, remote frontier sort of area in Northern Territory. Not many people. There's a few like indigenous tribes and things like that up there, and settlements and whatnot, and just like untouched place, like incredibly remote. It like hugs the coast, and then where we were hunting was on more of like the floodplains and escarpment country and sort of sandy ridges and stuff. And I'd never hunted for bangtang, so I didn't really know what to expect. To be honest, it wasn't really like a species that was obtainable to me. It was like I'd always wanted to hunt a banteng eventually, but just because I was saving for a house and stuff like that, I was like, oh, do I hunt? Do I not? It was like going to cost a lot of money to do this hunt. And then James goes, I haven't drawn any tags in America. Let's do it. Like, you know, you're leaving the NT. You've got a car there. You've got all the camping gear. We'll just go and do it. Like we did it as like a bit of a DIY sort of hunt through an outfitter. And it was incredible. Like it was honestly one of the best hunts I've ever been on. I was not super keen to get in front of the camera. And like for Twin Elements, James and I film all our hunts. It's just one of those things. And I, to be honest, said to James, like, I don't even know if I want to hunt. Like, and he just said, just practice, see how you go. And like, again, going on a hunt, I was practicing every day. He was like, just practice, see how you go. And when we get up there, if you want to do it, you can. If not, don't. And I just said, all right, like the only way I'm going to do it is if I literally go first up and just like go for it sort of thing. Like I don't want to talk to the camera. I don't want to like discuss what's going on and this and this and this. Like it was a very much just like, I just want to hunt and not think about things for a bit based on like everything that was going. And it was hard. Like I'd love to say it was like a really good trip and like everything went well. But like there were moments like I was crying in front of my dad and my brother just because my mind was elsewhere. But I was so lucky that like the banteng were like, we essentially like first morning at this hunt, drive to our spot, walk about 6 kilometers towards where we wanted to hunt, and then hadn't seen an animal, hadn't seen a track, hadn't seen sign, nothing, like plenty of bird life, the odd dingo, things like that. It was like incredible. And then we hit this like little corner on the edge of like the floodplain coming into some paper barks, and it just like opened up into like highways essentially of like game trails. And we were like, all right, we're hit sign, now we're going to start seeing animals. And then the closer we were getting to this floodplain, we just started seeing like scat, mounds of like scat and their feces, like entrenched game trails. And we just ended up following one with the wind in our face. And sure enough, started finding banteng. And we're like sifting through these mobs of cows, these like smaller bulls and whatnot. And then got onto this like eventual, like a rutting mob of banteng bulls. And there would have been, I could liken it to chiddle deer that we've experienced where there was like an in-season female. And there would have been 30 bulls fighting over her.
They fight hard, man.
So many of them had scars and holes in them. And like, yeah, it was amazing. And like they made these vocalizations, which were pretty cool. Like not quite like a cow, but a little bit different. And it was cool. I got into 25 meters of that cow that was in season. And then there was this one particular bull that was just circling her, and anything that came close, he was like bashing and scaring and fighting off and stuff. So I kind of just went, look, I don't know what a big banteng looks like. This is the biggest, most mature bull out of 30 bulls. Like if it was a chiddle deer, it tells me that it's a mature animal. I was like, the situation feels right. I've watched this bull for like 20 minutes, circling her, sniffing her, doing the Fleming response where they like sniff the female cow's like urine and it hits like the
whole top lip starts rolling up.
Rolls up, and they do that, point it to the sky and stuff. It's almost like they've got this weird pheromone in their nose. And he did that, and I just turned to James and said, yeah, I'm going to shoot him. Like, and he was kind of like, oh shit, okay, like, yep. And then we just waited until he presented the right shot. Had no idea we were there, like both of us, like well within bow range, like 20 odd yards. And yeah, I just remember like pulling back the string, settling on him, and just like when that arrow released, I was kind of like just stoked that my job was over a little bit. I remember, so it wasn't like quite for the right reasons and things, but I just remember being like really like relieved, and watching him go down was just like so emotional because like I was just like stoked and had done it and just could kind of like relax a little bit and didn't have to be in front of the camera, which is like, so I had that going on. But then like going over to the animal, it just talk about like a range of emotions. Like they're so big, and then you like run your hands over like their skin, and it's like leathery velvet sort of, like it's cool. And then they've got all these beautiful white features and markings, and just like then sort of like trying to picture where they come from in like Bali and Indonesia, and like why they're called Bali cattle and stuff. It was just like very like grounding and made you feel like present again, just like when the animal was on the ground going like, you can have all this other stuff going on in your life, but like there's this beautiful animal in front of you like right now, like you're in a place that you'll never probably go again, like, you know, with your brother and dad. Like it was just insane. Like it was really, really cool. And like the way that they're similar to a Cape buffalo, where their horns come in and then they've got that big boss over their forehead and stuff, and just like the scars on them was incredible. So I had like an awesome hunt, got all the bangtang like experience that I basically wanted from that. Then was very happy to like jump behind the camera, and then I essentially followed James for like 3 days, and I won't go too much into his detail. Like we filmed it all. It was like insane, but James was very selective from that moment on, because we had a week-long trip, and because I'd shot one on the first day, he had plenty of time to like look for a bull that he wanted. We now knew what a good bull was, you know, like could pick and choose a little bit more. And then like similar to that US trip, where when you set like sights on a mature animal and go, I don't know, it's not about just killing the first animal, but I want to take a particular animal at some point, you start seeing like more things. And we started seeing more dingoes, more buffalo, more pigs, more like everything, more bangtang. Like it just, again, you're not just going there, oh, there's bangtang, dead sort of thing. Like you're hunting for an experience. In that part of the world where there's like no people, was just ridiculous. Like we had dingoes coming into like 5 meters, growling at us, not knowing what we were as humans, like dingo puppies howling at 10 meters. Some of the feral pig hunt, so spoiler, James shoots a beautiful bangtang on like day 4, and then we had 5 and 6 to hunt feral pigs. So I went and hunted again with the bow on day like 5, and we found this little, like, it's so remote up there, and there's obviously saltwater crocodiles in like the Northern Territory there, and like big ones, and in every lagoon, every water source, you do not go near them. We found this water source, and it just stuck out like a sore thumb, because as soon as I saw it from like 500 meters away, I didn't see the water. I just saw like bird life on it. I just saw like 100 brolgas, and then cockatoos in every branch above it, and then ducks lining like the edge of this dirt. And I said, James, I'm like, there's got to be like no way there's a crocodile in there, because that would just be smashing everything. And as soon as we got towards it, we just started like, we spooked like a pig. We actually like, because we were looking at this, like we were like, oh, there must be water up there. We were walking too quickly and like spooked this boar, and it got up out of this tiny little patch of shade under a bit of a paperbark log and just like took off. And I was like, oh shit, like we are here hunting, like slow down, we'll get to the water eventually. And in the space of like, we'd walked probably 10k for that day, not seen bugger all except for wild, like native wildlife. And then within 500 meters of this water source, I ended up shooting like 5 boars or something like that, like really good pigs, like being selective as to which boar I'd shoot, just because there were so many. But it was just like the most insane hunting for pigs that I've ever experienced. And that happened in like 2 hours of like my afternoon. And then we went through that. It was just like incredible. Some of the footage of like shooting these bedded boars, and there's buffalo drinking and brolgas flying, and the sun setting the NT, like it's mesmerizing. We went back to that spot the next day. James had his bow, because again, we like sort of just alternate. Like I had an awesome experience, it's your turn up now, like sort of thing. And I think James went and shot like 7 or 8 boars for the day, like just incredible. Again, being extremely selective, like to the point where he was like brought a broadhead sharpener for the tips of his arrows, because like he'd shoot a boar, like it would go and expire. He'd go and get the arrow, which had gone through it, resharpen it, just so he's got like 5 arrows in his quiver for the day, sort of thing. Because it was just, some of the footage is like spectacular. But again, I don't think there was a crocodile in that little waterhole, which was probably like the size of this room, like, you know, 15 meters in diameter. And just the wildlife that was so reliant on it. It was like the perfect storm of build up to the wet season, but it being dry. Year. Like, yeah. And that's, again, mental, like, versus physical punishment. Like, mentally knowing that we haven't seen anything all day. We're walking for 10 kilometers. At some point, we're going to hit a little honey hole. Like, it's just, you know, at some point, something will happen. Like, that's hunting. And then we did. And then for the next 2 days, we were, like, rewarded with that effort. All the meantime, you're doing that in 40-degree temperature with, like, humidity. It would have been so hot, like, at that time. Like, some of the footage, you're just sweating and you're, like, wiping away sweat. You couldn't really drink fast enough to just keep it, like, in. And like, credit to the old boy, he came along with us, and it was just something, we talk about it now. We're going to try and get him to go and do that hunt, and we'll hopefully video him in 2025. Like, that's on my bucket list, is to get him to go and hunt a bangtang. But yeah, it was magical. It was like a really, really good trip. And it was one of those things that like I was looking forward to, then I didn't, and then I'm so glad I did it. Like, and I'll remember that forever. Like, it was a magical trip. But yeah, some of that footage will be really cool. I
love the NT. It's such a beautiful place, and it's so different everywhere else. And you go there, and it's one of those places like we mentioned earlier with Alaska. Like, it's like you feel, and the reality is you are is so alone. I've got TO access to Numbulwar in Eastern Arnhem Land that I'm going to try and line up probably a 2 to 4 week trip. and go there, and it'll be just like local people fully winging it, drive out there, do some hunting, do some fishing, hopefully get some geese, shoot plenty of pigs, buffalo. It should be a fat time. It's like you can go to those places, and if you respect the land and the people, and you give a bit back, like they love the meat and all that sort of stuff. Give a bit back to them. You're always welcome there, and it's like one of those frontiers places. It's sort of, I don't think it'll ever settle in the next few lifetimes, not properly. You know what I mean? Like urban civilization type of way. Well, I probably have to wrap this up and get a move on. I've got to go back to Mansfield tonight and then shoot to the Hunter Valley. Got a few more bow hunting and hunting podcasts, and potentially a marlin fish, a wedding, some more photography work. But thank you very much for your time, man. It was good to catch up. We'll have to do it again. This is only just scratch the surface of the conversations we can have. Like, there's so much more to catch up on. But you're moving back north. Yeah, moving back to Townsville in the next few weeks. Hopefully buy up there and just get back into the hunting, fitness, diving, everything like that. And then we'll detour to your expo, March. Yes, March 1st. Probably should always just plug that on here from now on. I don't know why I don't. I did it on the last podcast, which isn't live yet, but I need to get into the habit of starting to plug it. Yeah, March 1st, Flow State Outdoors Expo, Wodonga Racecourse. Should be like a fat time, hunting and fishing, some guest speakers. The twins will be there. Adam Greentree will be there. Nick Morton will be there. Going to try and do some live podcasts. There'll be wild game cooking demos and all sorts of things. So it'd be good to have a fair turnout. It's the first one that we've done, and we're just doing it to give back to the community and hopefully fund it yearly after that, and make it different to the usual just trying to sell shit to people type of expo. And people actually get a lot of value from it and learn and networking, and because I think like the hunting community Australia-wide needs events like this now more than ever, just with the amount of shit that's going on like in WA and South Australia now, and all the Queensland's gun license laws are changing, and the Victoria parks are supposedly going to be shut down, and all the state forest issues in New South Wales now. So I think there's value in getting a community of people behind it and supporting hunting and the outdoors in general. Yeah, the lifestyle component of it, and just catching up with people who are like-minded is massive. I remember you sent me the dates, and I was like, oh geez, it's literally over, like when I was going to do a spotted safaris hunt. And I just went, nah, bugger it, I haven't booked anything in yet. This is like an opportunity to be present, meet cool people, do cool stuff like in the outdoor scene that I love. Let's do it. Yeah, and in your defense, we decided to do it like start of mid-December for some reason, and with a two-ish month turnaround, which is like a big effort. We'll be running behind the whole time until we get there. So no, I've seen briefly like the amount of work you put in, but it's just like, again, you bite something and then you just chew the fuck out of it until you get there. And it's one of those things that I think it'll be really cool. Circles back to that saying yes and then just figuring it out. Figuring out a way to get there, and it's a lot of sleepless nights. How can everybody find your guys' stuff? The guiding and the twin elements. So personally, it's Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors on Instagram, and then everything is pretty much under the Twin Elements umbrella, which is what James and I do for all our media work. We've got the podcast launching as well, which will be like a good avenue for people to hopefully take some lessons from like what they hear from us and then apply that out in the field, hunting outdoors wise. And then I also do the guided Chittledy hunts out of North Queensland called Spotted Safaris. So they're the main ones. But yeah, again, pretty active on socials. If anyone ever wants to chat or anything, just flick me a message or something and we'll go from there. Appreciate your time, brother. Always good to see you. Thank you, mate. We'll do it shortly. We will. Bye, everybody.